Welcome to a very special bonus episode of the Devil's Rest Book Club. No pomp, no circumstance. It is our first review and first read through of The Shadows Upon Time. And it is something that we need to talk about. We are pretty early on. There's not a lot of reviews out there.
Two or three, not a lot.
BookTube or on podcasts. It's something that you and I have been wanting to talk about. We've saved some of our own personal conversation to be able to have a more in-depth conversation here.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to dive in. We need to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm really pumped to talk about this. At first, for those listening, we'll do a non-spoiler section at the start so we can kind of discuss non-spoiler thoughts for people who are just thinking about checking out the end of the series to make sure that the end is good before they jump into the whole thing. So we'll do non-spoiler stuff. After that, we will do spoiler talk, where we'll probably go through some various plot points, characters, stuff like that. I also wanted to caveat at the outset, the only way to experience this book is to read it. It's impossible that there's so many good things about it that I'm going to not even remember all of them. So definitely, even if there's a bunch of cool stuff here, there's even more. It's the only way to fully digest it is to read it. So there's even more good stuff than we'll be able to talk about here, but I'm excited to talk about it.
So let's just begin our spoiler-free section, just talking about our general thoughts of the book as a whole.
Yeah.
And thinking about the format that we normally take with our episodes. Something that I'm thinking about right now in this moment is how it's going to take us like 3 years to cover this book. There are 91 chapters or something like that.
Yeah.
It's 904, 905 pages, somewhere around there. And every page, there's no fluff. I actually think the book is very little fluff. Like it's so good.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
There's a huge density of ideas and action and stuff. I mean, it's really quite amazing. You know, some of the things that other people have said about the book, which I agree with, is that the book can sound like, when you're describing it, that it's overly long or something, but it's really not. As you read it, every time you start to question about whether or not something's necessary, it becomes immediately apparent, like, this is actually not wasted space. Everything is super important. There really shouldn't be anything cut from this book, in my view. It is a long...
He did though, right? Like he did the cutting on the floor.
But he trimmed it right to where I think it should be, right? I mean, to take any more, you would lose part of what the book actually is. So it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing that it ended up this long and this consistently important. You don't meander very much.
For a book that is 375,000 words, I devoured this book. I mean, not only because I wanted to know what was happening, but that I didn't feel like I had time where I could take a breath. Like I needed to keep going. We have been on this journey for so long, for so many books, for so many hours we have spent with Hadrian understanding. And now we're at the pinnacle, and it just feels like we're on this roller coaster at the very, very, very top.
Yeah.
And then you go over the edge, and it's like, that moment of going over the edge is so long in the book, way longer than I thought. And then you come back up the roller coaster and you think you've stopped. And then there's another edge that goes down. Like it's the craziest roller coaster ride of a book that I've maybe ever read.
It's really, truly an epic novel by itself in a vacuum. Even absent the rest of the series, by itself, this qualifies as an epic. Just because of the nature of how much stuff actually happens in this book. Really wild. I mean, this could it's like the length of like a shorter trilogy, just this book, in the best way possible. I mean, there's multiple arcs. It is unbelievable. I mean, there's action sequences that are the length of other books. Like literally, it's pretty unbelievable. It's true definition of a science fiction epic just by itself, not even considering the rest of the books. It's pretty wild that it can managed to do that.
And I think it's safe to say, at least your opinion as of right now, is that without this, Sun Eater would be significantly less. Like this is a satisfying way to end the series.
Yes.
In terms of the entirety of the book, not just the ending, but the entirety of the book.
Yeah, I agree. You know, sometimes, I think people worry, especially at the end of a long series, of, not only does it end well, but does it end too quickly? Like, am I going to feel that I had this massive investment for a short payoff? This book, it lands the plane, it gives you the payoffs, but it gives you them, like a lot of them, over a long period of time in a way that doesn't feel stretched. So you get a long experience of the payoff of this series in this book. You know, it doesn't happen in a page at all. You get to actually read something for a long period of time, multiple days, multiple sittings, that is the payoff for the rest of the books, which is really cool. I mean, I've read other series where the end is good, but if you read 6 books to get to the final book and the conclusion is 50 pages, I mean, you can still feel a little bit kind of cheated because it's, you know, I gave this big investment and just it happened like that. This book doesn't do that to you at all. And it's so weird because it's very paradoxical, because people may be tempted to think that the way that's described means that it's somehow like extended more than it should be. And it's just not. Everything makes sense. And when, you know, you hear the author talk about the fact that this is the book he always wanted to write, I totally get that after reading this book. It's different than the rest of the series, and it's a very special thing by itself. Rocchio's been setting up a sandbox for a long time for him to just play in at the end of the series, and that's this book. It's pretty unbelievable. Pretty unbelievable.
I think the payoff only works and the length only works and the sandbox concept only works because he is taking the best parts of each of the books in the series really to set up and pay off, right?
Yeah.
The best parts of the politics that plays into Sun Eater is in Shadows Upon Time. The best weird stuff, you know, I'm trying not to spoil anything. The weirdness of the sci-fi that we love is in this book. The action sequences, the high matter sword fights are in this book. The epic space battles are in this book. The horror of the Cielson is in this book. All of the pieces that he has set up in each different individual book in the series is masterfully brought together and concluded in this book. As of right now, is Shadows Upon Time your favorite book in the series?
Yeah, it's my favorite in the series. You know, as I've digested it more as time's gone on, I noticed it's like I'm feeling kind of I was feeling a little bit negative for a couple of days. I'm like, what am I feeling? Because I really loved that book, and I think it's just that I'm just kind of grieving that this is over.
Yeah.
You know, it's so wild because the book is so great. It's hard to. I don't think I've devoured a book this quickly, sacrificed this much sleep for a book in as many successive nights as I. Yeah, it was kind of ridiculous. I mean, put this book before everything except for work, and it definitely did things that the other books didn't do. So, for example, I think it takes all of the flavors from the previous books. You get them all here. You know, you get your horror, you get your action, you get your aura farming moments, you get your fun and interesting philosophical ideas. This book emotionally, though, I think is the strongest in the series. The characters, you really, really feel the characters in this one. This book made me cry, which is something that the other books did not do. And
same.
It's hard for me to cry at a book. Really, it takes a lot for me to have that much emotional investment. I've only cried a couple of other times. I've cried in book 4 of The Dark Tower, book 8 in The Dark Tower, and Hyperion, and this, and that's it. So it's a really strong testament to how emotionally moving the book is. This is also, I think, the most, I don't want to say religious. It is the most religious of the books, but I don't want people to scare them off. I mean, it's like the most meaningful of the books is kind of the feeling I'm trying to convey.
It has the most depth in
totally
every facet, philosophical, scientific, I think to some extent too.
Yes.
And spiritual, right? The depth of this book, it is not just it is an entertaining science fiction action epic. But there is a philosophical and spiritual depth to this book that I have not found ever in another series, especially not in science fiction. I mean, the closest that we have is, you know, the analogy that we won't bring up now. But I will say that, like, I think it's going to be very difficult. The feeling that you described about the negative grieving piece of it, I'm now looking for something else. And everything I go to is disappointing. Yeah. Like that. I mean, that's how good this book is. So, like, here's my negative piece of the book. If you want to be disappointed with anything speculative fiction or science fiction related, don't read this series. Because honestly, I don't think I'll find something. There's a very strong possibility that this is the peak science fiction, science fantasy epic that I ever read. Like this and that's sad to think about to some extent, but it does go to show like this book is really amazing. That is incredibly amazing that he was able to do it.
Yeah, it's really great.
I'm still flabbergasted.
It's really great. Really is the culmination of everything Rocchio's worked for. It feels that way, at least to me, and I'm very excited that the series ends well, because the series deserves to end well, and I'm really excited about our second trip through it.
Oh my gosh. Dude.
Over the course of the next 2 decades, our children will be graduating college by the time we're finished this one. But it's exciting to be able to go back through it. I will say one last point is that this book, interestingly enough, has, like a passive buff to all of the other books, because
100%.
The amount of times that other works in the book, other characters that haven't been mentioned in several books are called back to. I mean, this pulls all the strings together. I mean, it really does. And at the same time, what's so cool about this, it's so hard to get someone to experience this fact without reading the book, is that it leaves more on the table to be excited about without making you feel unsatisfied with there being unanswered questions. The book sort of ends with the world still being alive and lived in, while giving you a conclusion you could be satisfied with. So it leaves you excited for the future of what this universe can do whenever Rocchio gets back to it.
Which he will at some
yes,
point. He will.
He will.
There are more stories to be told in the universe. He's made that abundantly clear.
Yeah.
He is moving away from it from now. But honestly, if we never hear anything specifically about Hadrian again, I don't think that anybody should be disappointed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that you could add more, don't get me wrong. And I kind of want more because I'm sick, but I think it's fine. Like, it's perfect the way that he decided to do it.
Yeah.
I will say the one last piece that I want to end our spoiler-free section with is revisiting the conversation that we had in our episode 0. What is your pitch now for Sun Eater, having read Shadows Upon Time?
Sun Eater is a science fiction epic series about a man who destroys a sun to annihilate an alien race bent on destroying humanity. History paints him as a villain, and this epic series is his telling of the historical events that had him painted that way. Not only that, the series is complete. It's 7 novels long, and if you want to take pit stops, there are novellas and short stories. It sticks the landing, and there are no bad books in the series. That is my pitch for the series overall.
Yeah. It felt incomplete when we first did it, right? Because it was the expectation of being excited for book 7, but not ultimately knowing. Now we can say with full confidence that it is perfect and complete. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's damn near, and it's complete.
It's exactly what it should have been.
100%.
100%. It's exactly what it should be. If there are quibbles about some of the details, I think it's actually not because something's wrong. It's because the taste and the goals of the author are probably different than your taste, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly the way it should be, in my view. Yeah.
So with that, I don't think that I can't say anything more spoiler free. So let us end our spoiler free section there. So anybody who's not wanting to know anything about the story, we are going to talk about plot. We are going to talk about the ending. This is your warning. Stop listening now. I'll give you even a little bit of more of a moment. Stop listening if you don't want to be spoiled. This is your final warning. Now we are talking about spoiling everything that we want to talk about in this book. You've been warned.
Yes.
Let's begin by talking about the plot, because that's probably going to be the bulk of our conversation, is talking about different plot beats.
Yes.
How did you feel at the beginning of the story? I mean, I loved being back on Annika at the very, very, very beginning.
Yeah.
Right? I love returning back and him showing Aloran the weirdness of the way that time like flows in reverse backwards. He's trying to convince Aloran that all the events that have conspired at this point have happened. But in particular, piece at the beginning of the book that I loved the most was the multi-POV section of the book, which for those who have not listened to Tudor Ramble's interview with Christopher Rocchio, which I recommend you go listen to, he said he did this totally out of spite.
So
100% out of spite, because he had, I don't know, maybe he was online or something like that. Some narrative came out questioning whether or not he had the ability to just write Hadrian versus writing everybody else. And so he just wrote 10% of the book as multi-POV.
What's so interesting to me about it is that if you have that criticism of him, you can go and read his short stories and novellas, many of which are not Hadrian. So he's already shown he could do this, but I will say it was jarring jumping into a Sun Eater book and it wasn't Hadrian the whole time. I was like, when we were first in there, I was like, oh man, this is like, I really hope this is good because this is super, super different. And it was great. It was really fun jumping through the sequences at the start of this book with different perspectives. And one of the things, I think previous people had said is, I've heard some criticism of people is like, we're always with Hadrian in these battle sequences. And so we get one kind of POV of like on the ground, high matter kind of fights. But what's interesting with this book is because it does this at the start, you get like a variety of things happening. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on here at the start. You get to kind of be in a Cielson's head for a minute. You get to be in Cassandra's head.
There's an Irktani point of view too.
There is an Irktani point of view. Man,
like everybody.
It's really cool to see multiple POVs for him to show off a little bit. It's kind of fun. Not everybody is as compelling as Hadrian, but that's because we've had 6 books to get to know Hadrian and stuff. So but it is cool to be able to do that a little bit.
This is also like, we have to understand this is an autobiography in universe too, right?
Yes.
The idea that he would have other perspectives outside of his own is insane, right?
Yeah.
The framed narrative sort of limits you in that perspective, but I think Rakio actually does a really, really good job of writing the line because he's listening to it as if Hadrian is consuming the story as well, just to sort of, give a little bit of a middle finger, but also show you, hey, I can write other people too. It's just, I chose this framed narrative for a reason.
Yeah. I will say, as we started this section, I was thinking to myself coming into this book, I had some nerves because I was like, the Battle of Argossos prior to this book was my favorite battle I've ever read. And the Battle of Argossos is so amazing. It's like, man, how are we going to like transition this book? And Rocky's like, the Battle of the Demiurge or the battle for the Demiurge. I was like, I hadn't even considered that it was just immediately going to go crazy in that regard. So the fact that we start the novel with such a high pace alongside the POV switching, something that's really great about POV switches in this way sometimes is that if you switch POVs in this way, you can switch POVs with the action. So there's no logical like kind of ebb and flow. You can just jump to the high points of all of the different points of view. And he does that really masterfully in this section of the book. It's really great.
I love the idea that the Kalen variant of Karnsagara kind of wins, right? So we find out like at the very beginning when some of the captains of the Latarans, right, end up on the Demiurge to try and talk down, we're doing the peace thing post Battle of Argossos. And one of the captains of the 4 captains, I think, that show up on the
something
ship
like that,
is a Karnsagara incarnation, right?
Yeah.
I love the idea that actually Kalen won and not the old Sagara, because now we will never know. And I like Karnsagara. I think Karnsagara is an incredible character in the series.
One of the best characters in the series for sure.
And I love the idea that in all likelihood, right? I mean, whether or not we see him in expanded Sun Eater stuff, there will always be the thought in the back of my mind is like, is this person Karnsagara or not? I love that.
It's one of the perfect things that he's so good at as an author is giving the reader more question marks instead of answering all of the questions.
Yeah.
Karnsagara has to be a question mark. Has
Always.
to be. It would be, Karnsagara would be diminished if he wasn't a question mark, right?
100%.
And so it was the perfect choice to have an ambiguous end to Karnsagara, so we don't know if he's out there or not. It's perfect.
Do you think Karn comes back in expanded Sun Eater stuff in the future?
I would be very surprised if Karn didn't. I don't know if Karn will come back as openly as Karn was in this series. I would find it hard to believe that Karn wouldn't be somewhere. I bet, let me put it this way. I think Karn's probably...
A Karn, not the Karn, but
a Karn. A Karn probably shows up somewhere, and we probably won't know that it's Karn for a while. That's probably my guess, is that... Also, I think it's super valid if he never addresses whether or not Karn is in the story ever again. I think that is also fantastic.
Oh, dude, I would love a theory of like the actual thing that's happening in the author's brain. That, because we'll talk a little bit later about there's some theories that are floating around right now that I haven't dug too deeply into, but that I like the idea of. some of the ways that Hadrian is talking about different things. If like the theory behind the theory on the page, the sort of like is that this person is Karn, but it's never explicitly said.
It'd be so fun.
That. I would love that.
It'd be great. It'd be so fantastic.
It'd be so good.
This sequence also is just, there's a couple of things that I think are really worth mentioning that really takes the book off here. Number one, this section gives us our first experience with the Archontic weapons that are described in book 2. And holy crap, right? Like, so when Rocky has talked about science fantasy for his entire kind of spiel for the series for years, it is most exemplified, in my view, by these weapons. This is the bridge where sci-fi becomes so complicated that it becomes magic again. And it's so freaking cool. And even just, it has to be experienced. These weapons, we've got several.
Albedo was the one that we see at the very beginning. Albedo is crazy. It's so crazy.
It's
every Archontic weapon is insane and crazy, and there are ones that are crazier than others. Don't get me wrong. But just he did a good job of like not going like too crazy too quick, because as the book progresses, like as the story progresses, the weapons get crazier too, right?
Yeah.
But in particular, starting with Albedo, I thought was a very, very good choice, because it's I can picture it in my mind more than I can picture the Archontic weapons later in the book. I will say, how in the hell is anybody going to put this on the screen? Like, I don't think you can. I honestly don't think you can.
Reading the scale of this book made me really convinced that it should be animated or something, because unless the budget is literally like $700 million, it's like, I can't picture this being done justice of, Albedo whipping through space, destroying entire fleets of
650 missiles in a second.
It's impossible to show that in a way that's satisfying or looks good without a huge budget. But man, what a display of something that's been, this is book 2 that was teased, and now we're in book 7 seeing it. I after that book ended, I was like, I don't think we're ever going to see those things. And it turns out we see a lot of them in book 7. They feel like fantasy items that someone got in a dungeon and is now using against the evil wizard or something. They feel like fantasy objects that have been hoarded in this horrible dragon horde that is the Demiurge. It's really cool. And on top of that, in this sequence, we get some really interesting, almost like political sort of stuff happening with the different factions all in the same area trying to negotiate. And this is sort of where we get the reveal about the Chantry at the start of this book. And it caught me off guard. I was not prepared for that.
What we're talking about specifically is the idea that essentially to try to take over the Demiurge, which is the most powerful ship, period. And the Chantry is acknowledging this by the fact that they're trying to take over the ship. They bring an AI on board in order to take over the ship. And not only that, they have this technology that is so far and above advanced than anything else the Imperium has, that very clearly at the very beginning of the book, Rocky is saying the Cielson aren't the only problem that Hadrian is going to face in this book. There is a very big problem, and the Chantry is that problem. And I love the fact that and we'll talk about this more, because I think that we should spend some time talking about the Chantry as a character.
Yeah, I agree.
But I loved the sequences where the super soldiers are fighting him on the ship. Loved like, it's basically like their version of Cortana shows up like on the ship. Just the way that the ship is creating these hands to go and repair itself, and in doing so, like that, like it cuts out the cancer by attacking the one Chantry guy that's on the ship. It's crazy. This whole section is so great.
It's so good. And you've got these like crazy aura farming moments of the soldier shooting his 100-foot long high matter thing, and he just catches it with the sword. It's just, dude, the whole section is just like dynamite the entire time. Amidst all of the political intrigue and interesting faction stuff going on, the multiple POVs, it's just like top notch Sun Eater action sequences the whole time. It's really great.
I'm going to ask you a tough question.
Okay.
Vorgosa sequence at the beginning of Shadows Upon Time, or Sabratha sequence in Disquiet Gods?
Oh, see, okay. So you're pitting 2 unbelievable sequences against each other. This is
at the very beginning of their books too.
So I will say, this is a taste-oriented thing, so it's unfair to the battle for the Demiurge, okay? I am a freak for cosmic horror, so the Sabratha stuff, dude, it just,
Yeah.
everything with Ushara blew me away in that book in a very special way. If I had to pick one, I would say Sabratha just barely beats it, but they're such different fights. You know, one thing that this series does well is there's Xeno v human warfare, there's human v cosmic horror warfare, there's human v now human warfare in the Battle for the Demiurge, but then there's also, you know, human the cyberpunk warfare and stuff like that. And so your taste kind of will depend on which battles you favor just because of the variety. The Sabratha one is like perfectly aligned with my taste. So there's like, I guess I would say maybe Sabratha has like slightly higher peaks. Consistently speaking, there's way more like high points in the Battle for the Demiurge for me.
That's a very good way of putting it, because you're on the edge of your seat longer in the Battle for the Demiurge,
yeah,
over Sabratha, because Sabratha like ramps up, and then peaks and then comes down, right? Yeah. Battle for the Demiurge is a steady climb all the way, and then you plateau and then you come back down. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I would say the highest moment with Ushara beats it for me, but the consistency in the scale of the Battle for the Demiurge is better than Sabratha. Yeah. But it's a hard choice. If you made me pick, I'd pick Sabratha, but it would be begrudgingly. Do you have a favor?
I think the Battle for the Demiurge is better written. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. I agree with that.
I agree with your taste. Like I share the same taste of, I love the weird cosmic horror, existential dread that comes with the Sabratha stuff. But the way that the Battle for the Demiurge is written, I think is better. Not only with just the multi-POV, but also in general, the fact that I was, for however many chapters, just on the edge of my seat on that airplane as we were flying back. Like,
I agree.
It's insane.
Yep.
So we move from there to Hadrian making his last journey to Forum, right?
Yes.
I didn't think that we'd ever see Forum again. He decides to go back in a ship with Aloran as his sort of protection to go back to the Eternal City to try and get in contact with the Emperor.
And he goes back in his demon in white stuff, right? I mean, he's full white. He's got the laurel crown. I mean, he comes in
as a Victorian knight.
Yes. Yes. Unbelievable. This is like straight aura farming mini arc. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Yeah. This moment's unbelievable. He comes, he presents himself, this is kind of the moment where
he doesn't just present himself. He says, "Hey, I'm here. I need to talk to the Emperor. Oh, and by the way, my ship, the craziest ship in the whole galaxy, has orders to blow up this planet if I don't get to talk to him." What do you do with that?
This is the moment.
Cast the crown down, like all of it.
After the Battle of Demiurge, he takes out the people that are trying to betray him, and he comes here. This is the moment I feel like the Darth Vader thing. Like, this is where it's like, this is where he is viewed as Darth Vader at this point. He comes, and I'm like, this is where it's going to start, is that he comes here, and he is just fully, over the course of the series, he's been kind of negotiating a little bit with the Empire. At this point, he is fully just no longer has any F's to give at this point. I mean, it's like, I'm going to blow everything up if you don't talk to me. Just like coming here, throwing medals off of him like he just doesn't care. It's
staring at the Chantry Cantor that like murdered him and being like, "Look at me now." I don't think we should spend too much time on him, so I'm going to bring him up here. I think Aurelian is a character that's really underrated. In the scope of the story. I think he gets enough screen time, but I don't think he gets enough love in the fan base. I think he's a very well-written character and a very good version of what a bureaucrat or like a mid-level executive person that's trying to do their best job does. We'll talk more about that concept when we talk about characters in particular, but I just wanted to shout out Aurelian here because this is the last time we see him on screen. Hadrian just dropping half of an AI and being like, "This is what your church has. They've been preaching you can't use this, that they're demons, but they are." Boom.
Yep.
At me, bro.
Yep.
Total villain melodramatic move that is absolutely insane.
Yes. Yeah. It's pretty cool. This scene is really a Sun Eater moment because it shows Hadrian doing really cool stuff without drawing a sword. This is where you feel him as empire moving figure, which is really what this series is a lot about. So it's pretty cool to see that in its full scope here. when he walks in and sort of calls to account the whole structure that he's critiquing and stuff. It's pretty awesome.
And as a mirror to his visit to Forum and Disquiet Gods, this is a different Hadrian, not only physically in a new body, right, but also just like to your point, he holds all the cards in his hands now, and he knows that. And the power dynamic is totally shifted compared.
And once
to
again, he's a different character. Every single book, Hadrian is a different character. Yeah. He's a different person in every book. You know, in book 6, he's the I'm retired guy. He's like, leave me alone. I'm retired. I'm not doing that. But in this book, he's like full blown like hero with a higher calling. I have a higher authority than the empire kind of guy at this point. It's a very different. It's a fantastically cool version of Hadrian, and it is it's very well displayed in this scene. It's awesome. It's really awesome. You got to experience it, folks.
After Forum,
do we go to we go to Gododin or something like that? We make a pit stop before Danu, basically.
Yeah, I don't think that there's much to talk about with Gododin until after the events of Danu.
I agree.
So let's talk about Danu. Just know that when we talk about Gododin, there's a period at which Hadrian leaves to go to Danu. But the events of that impact the whole sort of arc at Gododin pre the battle. So he leaves after going and staging everything at Gododin. He leaves to go to Danu. And this decision that he made very clearly in the book costs a lot. This is one of the villainous moments, believe it or not. Like, he thinks that he knows better than the Quiet, right? He thinks that this can go another way.
Yeah.
This is a moment of pride for him, thinking that, you know what, have you watched Stranger Things?
I have watched all of Stranger Things in the first episode of the most recent season, but that's it.
Okay. Then I won't spoil anything. But there are certain characters that have this, I'll call it, willingness or desire to sacrifice their lives when they think it's for the best of everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hadrian believes that this is going to happen to him, and that he's going to go to Danu, he's going to face Eureka, and he is going to end the war before it started. He still thinks, like, after all this time, after multiple deaths, that he can avoid this future. After going through Kingdoms of Death, after going through being murdered for a second time and getting a new body, after going through meeting Ragama at the end of time, he still thinks that he can do this his own way, and he makes this decision to go to Danu. And although he does save 3,000 lives as a result of this, the Eternal City falls because he decides to go to Danu. So he still has not learned. He's still deeply, deeply, deeply flawed.
Yeah.
What an insane sequence on this ice. It's like, take a crazy multi-dimensional sword fight, put it on Hoth, and then when you leave that, Hadrian thinks that he's going to sacrifice himself using the Archontic weapons there, but he ends up not doing it.
Voidmaker or something like that he's going to use here or something.
Which he uses later, right? Voidmaker is very important for the story, but he thinks that, like, okay, this is going to be his swan song. He's going to end the war before the war even starts. If he takes out Eureka now, then it's fine or whatever. Not knowing that, like, he cannot see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
He just, in some ways, to your respect, he does change every book, but there are some core pieces of Hadrian that never change, and his pride is one of those things.
He kicking and screaming is going to have to be dragged to this fate. And this is pretty clear evidence of that. You know, we come into this sequence, and there's some pretty cool stuff. You know, they attack the Cielcen by surprise and start this sequence. Man, when I was reading this section of the book, I was like, Dorieka is a Sith now, bro. Like, he is like straight up and way scarier than that. I mean, he is a very different character in this book, actually, and it's first on display in this section. This confrontation between them deserves to be reread, actually. I need to read it again because it is pretty unbelievable. The scale of it. I mean, it's like the epic kind of lightsaber fight of the series, in my view. It's pretty wild, and then you're having, you know, really dark, you know, force-related kind of powers from Dorieka throughout this sequence. I mean, it's pretty astonishing, like all of the things that happen throughout the section. Hadrian's getting the crap kicked out of him in this period. And it becomes clear, I think, in this section of the story, I think it's this section, that Dorieka and the Watchers don't think they can defeat Hadrian through conventional means. They can't just cut his head off, right? They're firmly convinced at this point that if Hadrian is just killed, he will come back. But they have to make Hadrian despair and give up and take himself out. And then they believe that they will win. And so at this point, the story doesn't become just who wins the sword fight anymore. There is a battle of the will that sort of begins here in this book. And it's very important, I think, to this book overall that it isn't just a sword fight. It's really not. And it becomes much larger than that because of the way that Rocchio decided to display the fighting between Hadrian and Dorieka and the Watchers. It's one of my favorite things that can happen in books, and it almost never happens. It's almost always a sword fight or a gunfight or a ship fight. This is a battle for the soul of Hadrian that starts to happen here on Danu. And it's pretty heart-wrenching to watch at times.
You know, I need to think about that when I go through the book again.
Yeah.
Because you're right, this is where that sort of realization sets in for them, and the ending battle really begins on Danu. There are moments of peace in between, but I think the bigger thing, speaking to the High Matter sword fight in particular, this is the only major High Matter sword fight we get. I mean, Hadrian uses his sword later in the book too, don't get me wrong, but the big confrontation, the battle of the duel of the fates type battle that happens here. It doesn't happen when he goes to face Dorieka later, right?
Yeah.
But I think the best portion of the sequence on Danu is the horrifying Ushara takeover of all of the people that come in contact with her, including Cassandra when she gets taken over by Ushara.
Yeah.
That piece alone is absolutely horrifying.
It's terrifying, and you know, it's one of these things that starts another philosophical point of this book, which is that, you know, the Watchers really take on this role of this evil influence in this book in a way that we're kind of hinted at before. But there are moments in here where humans begin behaving in the most depraved, violent ways, and it's really implied, and really, I think I even said, that the humans are behaving like Cielsen. They're murdering, they're cannibalizing, there's raping. I mean, it's just terrible things that are happening. And it's at this point in the book I start asking myself questions of like, this is an interesting view we're taking. You know, the Cielsen have been under the influence of these things forever and have been shaped by them.
Thousands of years.
And you know, in this moment, they're humans in this situation are being shaped by them. What would a kind of long-term influence of these things look like? And it's a really great display of the way that evil distorts and turns good people into monsters. It's like, it's really checked up. It's like the most clear version of like cosmic horror zombie kind of terribleness that we get. It's even worse than that by a lot, because he's like evil, smiling, horrible stuff that happens. I will say, you know, the ending sequence here where Cassandra gets taken over and she stabs herself along with Hadrian completely caught me off guard. I was like, oh my God. Like I did not even think we were going to get even close to going here. I didn't know if Cassandra was going to make it. I didn't know if Hadrian was dead again. I truly did not know. I wasn't expecting Rocky to take us on an emotional roller coaster this quickly in the book, but first emotional sort of intensity was here at Danu. And I think it's a really interesting choice that he chose to have this happen over 3,000 lives. You know, it's interesting to me, you know, like the scale of this series, we're talking about billions of people. We're talking about, you know, planets, and they go and they endure this for 3,000 people because it's a good thing to do, not because the numbers matter or anything like that, or if it's more important to shoot the Cielsen in the sky. Like, of course we have to go down and save these people because they're people, you know, they're on those
strategically
planets.
It's a mistake because then it impacts the Battle of Gadara later, right? And events that we'll talk about in just a moment.
Yeah.
But it is the most successful military campaign against the Cielsen, period, full stop, up to that point in history. Yeah. They destroyed 9 world ships for the first time
in one battle. Yeah.
In one battle, which is astonishing. For one ship to do that is astonishing, or however many, I think Bassanderland goes too, right? Like, so there's more ships. They've never had a more successful battle against the Cielsen. Little do they know the strategic mistake will cost more lives. Now that you mention that, the first thing that came to my mind is this Hadrian's guilt for Switch? That is playing into this to some extent, because we find out some of the world building stuff here is that the people of Danu are all redheaded because there was an imperial bastard that ended up out on Danu.
Yes.
And so does he do this partially, not only because it is a good to save these people that are asking for help, but is there I need to do this for Switch to some extent?
Yeah. There's that's at play. And, obviously, Hadrian amidst this sequence mentions Gododin in the middle of it, and that's how the Sealson discover where they're at and everything, intending to draw them to Gododin.
Yeah.
Of course, that has...
Instead of Forum, right?
Yeah.
Because he knows that the Emperor's not at Forum. He's trying to bring Daraica out from Danu directly to Gododin because that's where they're prepared or whatever. It ends up not working. But yeah, Danu is... The Ushara on the ship stuff is just absolutely insane. It's
terrifying.
I need to read through it again.
He really took the introduction on Sabratha and just went crazy with it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we're not even talking about the same villain because the scope just gets so much bigger. Yeah. Ushara becomes very terrifying. I'm trying to recall, does Daraica use, his ability to kind of create visions and stuff like that in this sequence? I think he does briefly. I don't think it's to the extent as it does later, but I think...
Well, he is a projection there too, right? He is projecting himself there because he's not at Danu.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
can't recall.
I need to reread it. But I did want to mention when Cassandra does end up coming back and we hear about the moment that she had in the Howling Dark with her mom.
Oh, dude. Oh, I can't even... It's just, it hurts too bad.
Yeah.
It hurts, man. That was... Oh my gosh. Does Hadrian go to the Howling Dark as well briefly or something like that? Or am I crossing?
He has a vision of her.
That's what
as well.
Yeah.
Not in the same... And he realizes that she has green eyes, right? She has Cassandra's eyes.
Yeah. That's what it is.
In this sequence. And that's when he realized it is really her daughter.
Man, all of the dad stuff just hits different now that I have a daughter. It's just hard. But that's Danu. I mean, it's there's so much that happens at Danu, but roughly speaking, we have an interaction with a Siriani, we get the crap kicked out of us, and we run back with our tail and our legs. Now the Sealson know that we're at Gododin. It's kind of roughly what happens at Danu.
And so they go back to Gododin, and the whole sequence before the battle starts is when I said earlier in the spoiler-free section of our review, the best parts of the different books, the politicking that happens on Gododin before the Battle of Gododin is better than the politicking that has happened anywhere in the series.
I agree.
Full stop.
Yep.
It's the best. It's better than the best parts of the politicking in Demon in White.
Yeah.
Because when I said those things were merged, the first thing I thought was the politicking in Gododin is better than the politicking on Demon in White, which is the best political book in the series. He becomes Auctor of the Imperium by the Emperor's will, and then now has carte blanche to do whatever he wants, speaking in the Emperor's name, which I never thought that we would get to in the series. I thought that he would always be battling against the Imperium. The fact that he was made not only Auctor, like to speak in the Emperor's voice, but as part of the sequence as well, William desires him to take Celaene's hand in marriage.
I did not think this was going to happen, and I was so excited about it. Celaena has been one of these characters that I've just been like, man, like in the previous books, I'm like, I kind of buy their chemistry, actually. Like, I'm kind of like being silly and over here shipping them a little bit. And I don't do that. And I really admired her character in previous novels. And she really shines here, starting, in especially in this section where I'm like, this is like happening. I didn't realize that this was going to go here. We've had all these visions about them together. My thought throughout most of these visions was, I guess this is a future never to be because of Volca. And I don't think I had reconsidered, frankly, since we had lost Volca, that this actually could literally happen now. I didn't know that Hadrian would ever let go and be willing to do this. I'm very happy for him that he did, though, because it seems like a good thing, not just politically, but like they actually like have good chemistry. They actually care about each other. So it was really cool to see that actually started to happen in this book. And
we'll talk about her and William more when we get to the character section.
Yes.
The feeling that I got in this moment, this is a political battle that is constantly happening at every turn on the Battle of Gododin. This is kind of his last battle with the Chantry, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like this is this is the beginning of his political battle against Alexander for the throne, right? Now we are in the Game of Thrones. It is either Hadrian, whether it's via Selene or otherwise, or it is Alexander and the Chantry that are going to sit on the throne. So, right, there's a proxy person is going to be put on the throne to some extent, Selene or Alexander, and Alexander has cast his lot and is totally under the shadow kingdom of the Chantry.
Yeah.
Yod, the character of Yod, gets introduced in this whole series, in this whole section of the book. The like they blow up the main town and say it was Hadrian's fault. Like they set up this whole false flag operation against these people in this town, saying that Hadrian decided to blow it up because they were, making graffiti about him and Selene, calling Selene a whore and all this different stuff. They are so good at what they do, and they are so evil, and you could just tell. Like the snake is around and whispering in Alexander's ear the entire time.
It's so good because, this section, a couple of themes emerge. Number one, the practicality of evacuating a planet to try to get them out of harm's way. It becomes very clear that this is a practical impossibility. There's almost no way for it to happen.
Billions of people.
I had never considered this portion of the puzzle at all. When we are thinking about the story at the start, like, we blew up this planet because of the proximity, and like it feels like there should be better decisions to make. In this book, we really feel almost like, especially starting the section, is like, what other choice do we have to make? It feels like you're stuck in a really bad, with 4 bad decisions around you. It's very hard to make a perfect choice in this situation. And, the unrest that starts to develop because of the impracticality of getting everybody out, it feels, that this isn't a choice that anyone's making. It's sort of the natural death cries of a planet as they start to riot and fall apart because they know that there's no way off this planet. The moment where Hadrian is like, in the city and they flip the car and he has to run away. I mean, it's just all very good politicking. I do want to make a note here that these executors, or whatever they're called, these like imperial guards that have been hinted at throughout the series, bro, those things.
You're talking about the homunculi that are like around the emperor? Yeah.
Dude, so sick, unbelievably cool. The part that truly got me for those dudes, or those folks, I guess, was their like pure white garb that are like a moisture wicking. So even as they kill people, they say perfectly pure white as a dude. Crazy. So crazy. And very inhuman, just pure protectorate machines cutting people down even when Hadrian doesn't want them to, because the only thing they care about is protecting. And that's used against him in a very masterful political move. And it's great political intrigue. It's really good. I think you're exactly right. It's even better than Demon in White. It's more complex. It's more interesting.
Did they exist in Demon in White?
I think so, because I think we see they're always sort of around the emperor with permanently burning high matter swords, always out, this type of vibe where they're just constantly present. I think that they're around him, even at the beginning of the book, Demon in White, when Hadrian is in front of the emperor. I think that they're there even in that scene. They've been kind of like shown, but it's like a couple of sentences at a time, because we've never seen them have a reason to be violent.
The world building question I wonder about that is if this was if these guards existed because of William, like, is this a safeguard that William had set up? Because the Martian guard gets co-opted by the Chantry and by Alexander too. And so the Martian guard enters in. We've heard them and seen them before, but now they are a faction that is against Hadrian as well and his authority, and constantly pushing back against him because they revere the God Emperor as a god, right? Like that he is their god. And for them, I don't know if at the highest levels they believe that, similar to the Chantry, but regardless, they see Alexander as the next incarnation. They don't see Hadrian as that. So I was wondering if these other executors were a product of William safeguarding himself against political factors.
Yeah, I don't know. Definitely a closer observation when I see those folks again as on a reread.
There's a sequence back to back that made me pound my chest as I was listening to it on a walk with my kid. The first was when we get the reveal in this moment that the real seat of power that the Empire holds over the Palatine constellation is literally the genetic encoding that turns people that try and have kids, turns their babies into intises. And he holds the genetic keys. Now it makes sense why Jad was able to rebel, because they were the one, and why they are so like focused on constant genetic improvement.
Yeah.
Because they were able to take their genes out of the Emperor's grasp and rebel.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who were successful at doing that. Every other Palatine in the galaxy has their genetic coding held by the Emperor's blood specifically, right?
And I will say, there's something thematic about the fact that, as we're exploring book one of the themes that's become so central of the inhumanness of the Palatine class is their inability to have children naturally. And it's an interesting thing that the thing that holds this empire together is that they've had their ability to be human and have children taken from them. There's some central human fact that has been stolen and controlled from these people without their knowledge. It's not an accident that their children are born this way. It's intentional. I think it says something about, what the series is trying to say about humanity and the role that child rearing has, I think, in us being human, that we're controlled by that and we can't be ourselves without it. It's an interesting decision that he makes here, and it really, really works thematically for the world. Structures rely on this at every level. I mean, the empire will fall without the emperor giving control over to the next emperor. It's
which is what happens in the sequence. Ostensibly, at the beginning, he gets married to Selene in this sort of underground bunker with the emperor, and Nicephorus there to bear witness.
Yes.
And that was the pounding of my chest, not the eugenics side of things, just to be clear for everybody. But the pounding of my chest was William basically begging Hadrian to take the role. Yeah. Because he knows that Alexander cannot do it. And he's been trying to fight against the Chantry the entire time. I will talk a lot about William, so I don't want to talk too much. But the other piece in this section that made me pound my chest is we finally see Lorien show up. And that was throughout the entire book, from the very beginning on the Battle of Orgosis, Lorien disappears, right? And the question from the very beginning, early chapters, is Lorien going to show up or not? Yeah. And he does.
I love it.
I love their interactions. I love Lorien so much. Lorien is written so well. And he has created his own group, right? The Round Table Fleet, hearkening back to his Sid Arthurian, adoration. Yeah. He brings his, former Latarans over to the battle because he knows that this battle is important. And he does it not for Hadrian this time. Everything he's done up to this point has been for Hadrian, but he's done his last thing for Hadrian. But he couldn't let it go for Valka, right? He comes back for Valka and not for Hadrian. And I think that's a beautiful choice, and it makes sense for his character. Throughout this entire sequence on Gadadin pre-battle, I felt this anxiety of like, when is it going to start? Yeah. When is it going to start? When is it going to start? He goes back onto the Demiurge, and they just live life. Like, they're still prepping and doing life and making sure that, the plan is at this point. And he tells the Emperor, the only way that we can do this and stop the Monumentals / the Watchers is by blowing up the sun. That's the only way. And he mentions that he'll use a Voidmaker as well. But like, the only way that we can for sure stop the Cielson and the Watchers, period, end of story, is by blowing up the sun. And we get this description of Astrophage, which is
the Sun Eater,
archonic weapon that is going to eat the sun. Astrophage, literally the Sun Eater. They go and prep on Demiurge, and him and Selene are just like in the garden where he got his head cut off, right? And just like that, the sirens start blaring, and he sees a huge light emerge. Gadadin, the planet, is destroyed because of the decision that he makes on Danu, right? They realize, we can just we don't have to farm these people for food anymore. We can just show up out of warp and destroy them at a moment's notice. So we get this sort of inversion of what we thought. Like, we thought he destroyed Gadadin himself, like as a result of the sun blowing up. That's the sort of vibe that we got the whole time. And narrator says, no, the Cielson destroyed Gadadin the moment they entered the system. So the planet is just gone. Like, half of the planet is just cut. Like you see the core of the planet, like within the moment the battle starts, which was a crazy way way to
And
start this battle.
basically like most of the fleet too. I mean, like everything is decimated instantly. I mean, it's unbelievable just how quickly things start to go poorly.
Yeah.
You start to ask yourself questions like, how are they going to stand a chance against the scale of what they've brought? Like, oh, most of them are not. Most of them are just gone instantly. It's pretty amazing. The start feels like an unbelievable bang, and that kicks off, I mean, the longest war sequence I've ever read. I mean, it's like 250, 300 pages long. I mean, it's crazy.
It's a whole book.
It's a whole book by itself. And I mean, just as a caveat for this section, there is a 0% chance I'm going to remember every high and low of this sequence, because it is an entire book worth of stuff that happens here.
We're going to talk about the highlights of what Hadrian does.
Yeah.
I don't think that we can
There's no
do
way.
the battle justice. I think even the narrator says, like, I cannot adequately describe the scale of this battle.
Yeah.
Because it is the single largest battle humanity's ever fought ever.
Yeah.
But let's cut to, so he ends up on another ship, right? And he goes and is made the decision that, okay, I know I was wrong on Danu, but I'm now going to go and face Dorica myself. And I'm going to make my way onto Darentune, and I'm going to surrender, essentially. And that's the way that I'm going to be able to stop the Watchers, is by going on to Darentune and then using Voidmaker, like distracting them, using Voidmaker to disrupt their pattern, the pattern of light that these Watchers are made out of. That we're going to get into some weirdness here. Voidmaker is this coffin-shaped archontic weapon that has been staged, ready to fire, and it can only fire in certain intervals with certain precision that Orphan is doing from the ship when Hadrian gives the signal. So he's got this like dead man switch, or the switch that he's going to say like, fire now, fire now, fire now, whenever he gets all the Watchers together. So he goes on to Darentune and basically I think he kills one or two Cielsen, but he's just like, all right, take me, be the ones that took me to Dorica, because then you'll be honored or whatever.
How crazy does it feel walking back through Darentune with the memory?
Insane.
It feels unbelievable. I couldn't believe, he's like walking through and he's like, oh yeah, that's like where I was like hung up and stuff. Dude, great.
Where Urbane was doing stuff to my brain and stuff like that. Insane.
It's just so impactful. I'm so glad that we made it back onto Darentune. Had to happen.
There is a Dante's Inferno-esque hell / Jesus carrying the cross and being mocked that's happening here, right? Like all of the Cielsen are wearing, we didn't mention this before, but part of the reason that Danu was a mistake was 2 years before the Battle of Gadadin, they show up to Forum and they rape and pillage the entire planet and destroy it.
It's terrible.
So all of the Emperor's family is dead. Selene and Alexander are the only ones that could be the Emperor. And all of the Cielsen that are like mocking him and saying like, oh yeah, you've lost or whatever, are wearing the clothes and the garments and the jewelry from the Imperial City as he is being walked to Dorica. It is horrifying.
This is like a mini Kingdoms of Death moment, because Kingdoms of Death is like the most hopeless book I've ever read. It feels so hopeless and terrible. And he lets it slip again here, where he like allows Hadrian to feel hopeless momentarily. Hadrian is so confident in this book, but walking through here, you feel Hadrian doubting even just a little bit because of how terrible things are here.
Well, it's the Garden of Gethsemane doubt, right?
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah.
To that extent.
It really is. He marches through. One of the most insane moments from Darentune was as he's walking to Dorioca and the kneeling people that he commanded to kneel and then never retracted I was like, bro, you cannot. Yeah. I could not believe that.
There's two columns, or like I imagine like two congregations alongside this walk as he's walking towards this central area where Dorica is, of just dead Cielsen who are just kneeling with necks up, and you're just like, bro, what is this? So demonic. It's crazy.
It's really, really wild. And then, he finally confronts Dorica. This sequence, as I was experiencing it, I was a little scared because because this sequence was very interesting to me. On Danu, Siriani is very formidable, right? here in Darren Toon, he's like falling apart. I mean, he's just,
Yeah.
he's just degraded. You know, we have a sequence where there's a strange end to Dorieka in a way.
Yeah.
And
it's unsatisfactory. The way Dorieka Sirianni dies in this moment is very unsatisfactory, but I think it's very intentional because it's not about Dorieka, right?
It's not about Dorieka, and Dorieka's like kind of pseudo alive with Mid-UNR or whatever in future sequences. But it's a really interesting choice because it shows really, you know, there's this peak of evil moment where they come, they destroy Godot, and they've destroyed Forum, and this figure that we've had built up over the course of the series, who's really horrifying character. Evil is portrayed in this series as a purely destructive force. It doesn't create things; it just consumes things, and it just consumes Sirianni, and he falls apart. You know, like it turns him from. You know, there's this moment I'm thinking of when I was reading this sequence of this like proud, powerful alien walking on UA, marching Hadrian to his death, and he's just this powerful, strong thing. He's this like horrible, marauding emperor figure. And he's just this crackling, falling apart piece of stone at the end because of what evil's done to him.
A slave, Huvanar, I can't remember the name of the alien, but we get introduced to this Xenobite race for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's the queen of this Xenobite race, I think, that is like being made to be the cupbearer for Sirianni. And she, like this weird Mothman woman thing that's bearing the blood cup that Sirianni drinks from, takes the cup and whacks him over the head, and like his head falls off and cracks. And she gives Hadrian the moment to like escape, like get out of here right now.
Yeah.
And then we see emerge from the body like this weird light Cielson child thing that's huge in scale that grabs her and then squishes her. And he realizes that, oh, this is the moment the quiet was giving me to get out of here. I need to go. Yeah, we'll talk about the Watchers more. But Dorieka's end seems really unceremonious because he's no longer, at this point, like he is in metamorphosis, right? Like he has now shed his mortal form and become part of Mutinar, but Mutinar is really the one in charge at this point.
Yeah.
Right? Like Mutinar is the one that has taken over.
He's really used and cast aside, I think, a lot. And it's really shown in this moment that he was really like a stepping stone. And it's weird because it's like making me feel like empathy towards Dorieka for some strange reason, which is a crazy thing to say, but it's like, you know, like this character that was, you know, formidable has turned into a crumbling piece of stone. I mean, it's pretty wild.
We have plenty more to talk about with that. Remind me of that when we talk about the ending, because I just had a brain blast of like the difference between the Watchers and the Quiet that I want to bring back up.
Okay.
But the battle, it continues, right? He ends up on the surface of Darren Toon saying, hey, use the Voidmaker now, because not only are Mutinar and Ushara there, but there are also not just Cielson watching his like being paraded into this thing, but there are other Watchers, thousands of other Watchers that are there witnessing this event all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so he clicks the button to have Voidmaker be used. Voidmaker shoots through the core of Darren Toon and destroys these thousands and thousands of Watchers. And presumably at the beginning, we think Ushara and Mutinar are dead as well.
Yeah.
We get to the surface.
The part where I got really nervous because it was like, I was like, okay, Christopher.
It was too easy.
Yeah, I was like,
it was too easy.
I should have trusted it. I was like, I'm trusting you, Christopher, that this is not it, because that would be unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And it wasn't it.
Yeah.
It wasn't it.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler alert. And man, this sequence is where we start to get the Groundhog Day of horror sequence.
Oh my God.
It's really terrible. This is really where the war for Hadrian's soul really, truly begins. You know, there's this torturous...
This is where the final battle between Hadrian and the Watchers really begins, is right here.
And, you know, Hadrian is so shown over and over again, the death of his daughter in various circumstances, you know.
At Lorien's hand the first time, and you're like, Lorien makes a deal with the Chantry in this vision that Oshara sends to him, and she shoots Cassandra in the face, and you're like, wait, what?
That was the moment when I was like, this isn't real, because... it didn't feel like Lorien, you know, and it felt like a lie because it was a lie. And one thing I started to really feel in this moment too, as the sequence is repeating, is it's so interesting that the Watchers and the Cielson grew to hate reality because it's this lie that the Quiet created. And yet they're doing exactly what they're criticizing. Their supposed criticism of the Quiet is to Hadrian. They're creating this false thing. It's not true in the way Hadrian's reality is. And they do this to him over and over again. He manages to survive, but man, it's a depths of despair moment for him. It's pretty terrible.
Hundreds and hundreds of times she dies, he dies. He tries a bunch of different ways, all to no success. And then finally Ushara is trying to despair him so much that he kills himself, to your point earlier, because the only way that they can take Hadrian out is not because of his physical body, but his will to keep the fight going. She, at the very end, offers him again the opportunity. Mutinar says, like, Mutinar then takes the form, right? It's the form of Hadrian that he sees, Hadrian's body, but with 6 fingers and in this, like, light form or whatever. Gives him this final vision again of Hadrian taking Ushara as a wife and Cassandra nude, calling out to the legions of all of these people as a oracle to Hadrian's greatness and goodness as this million-year-long reigning emperor. It's just so sick and horrifying. And forgive me, I'll bring up Dune now. I won't talk about it
Golden
anymore.
Path vibes, dude.
It's 100% the vision that Paul Atreides, like Hadrian and Paul Atreides are different, and they would not be friends because Hadrian chooses action where Paul Atreides chooses inaction. Paul Atreides chooses inaction, and that leads to the jihad, where that essentially happens. His sister becomes the oracle, and he becomes the god emperor that he never wanted to be. Right. Whereas Hadrian chooses action, and he actively rejects the idea of that happening and becoming a reality because he knows that is evil and that's not his path. And he's seen the path. He's been given the foresight. He knows that this ends differently. And that's what saves him in this moment, right? And then they have a sequence where they're fighting and he's trying to get Voidmaker to come and attack her, and she gets damaged a little bit, but then here's where the weirdness gets in. They show their higher dimensional nature to some extent. She finds Voidmaker and she pulls. This is the one sequence that when I read it, I was like, there's no way that anything in physical visual media could ever do this justice. When she destroys Voidmaker and this higher dimensional Inception-like city begins falling out of the space and crumpling into our reality, that was the moment. It was like, I'm never going to understand our quantic weapons at all. I'm just never going to get it.
Oh my gosh, dude. The description of a weapon that is existing mostly within another dimension because beings created it that way.
Beings, because the AI
creates it, right? And so the American AI and stuff. But it's like the barrel of the gun exists in our world. And the rest of it is built upon this gigantic. Oh man, it's just so cool. That's one of the coolest sci-fi things I've ever heard of ever in my entire life. And it gets destroyed, taken off the map. I actually don't recall where that gets destroyed before Albedo, does it? It gets destroyed before Ushara catches Albedo. I don't remember the sequence. Ushara at some point
catches Albedo in its hand and crushes it.
Yeah.
Instantly and stops it. I think that does happen before she catches Voidmaker or whatever and destroys it. But regardless, they are showing that even the Archontic weapons that seem like they are the only hope are not enough.
They're not enough. We need the Sun Eater.
And so he escapes with Cassandra back to do they go to the ship, or they go to the Emperor's ship, or do they go to
I'm forgetting which ship it is, but they get to a ship that isn't
Demiurge.
I don't think it's the Demiurge.
Yeah, I think they go to the Emperor's ship and try to get, people off of there.
Yeah, and we get more Ushara madness and stuff like that.
Because Nicephorus ends up on the Demiurge at some point. I think that's in that sequence. He's on the bridge of this ship as Mutinar and Ushara are a giant version of Hadrian emerges from space, shining in light with 6 fingers, and grabs a ship in its hand and just crushes it, right? We cannot do this section justice. It is absolutely insane.
And Ushara's spinning wheels and this biblically accurate angel thing, just grabbing ships. It's so, the imagery is.
And the dragon, I mean, we talked about the dragon earlier. The dragon comes up, this is Revelation level stuff that's being talked about here.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. Eventually, we end up on the bridge of Demiurge and they are prepping for Astrophage, right? Hadrian is ready to go. He puts on, he observes the forms that he saw in his vision. He turns to where he thought he would see himself looking into it and smiles because he doesn't see anybody there because it's him looking into the future.
That moment gave me chills.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading the vision, being there. I always knew that that moment would happen where he turned and he was going to play the vision out, and it was so effective emotionally. And I think also notably here, and we'll talk more about this in kind of themes later and stuff, but he mentions that things are kind of different in the vision than from the vision too.
He has the ability to impact it differently. It's not exactly, the outcome is the same. Some pieces of it are the same.
Yeah.
But he freely changes it to some extent too. So it's not totally all predestination. There is free will that he has in choice in this moment, but he knows that at this point he has to blow up the sun. He does it. He engages Astrophage, and Astrophage is this small teardrop shaped weapon that creates a singularity, or a bunch of singularities, or creates a small enough singularity and propels it into the heart of a star, using the power of the star to create a black hole. And I don't understand the physics of it. Like he describes it as it's happening, and it takes a while. This is not a short process or whatever, but eventually the sun is eaten and it is no more. And the vision of, like, have you played Mass Effect 3?
No.
Okay.
Not played any Mass Effect games.
There's a vision of, I won't tell it then, but there's a vision of, I have visualizing Hadrian looking out of this viewport on the Demiurge as the light, the last light from Gadadin's sun is going to wash toward them. And we see the shadows of Meudinar and Ushara speaking to each other in this language. And then we get the POV of them talking about, I saw, like Meudinar talking about, I saw the crab-like people that were on the planet, like that he was responsible for, but he was in despair because he knew that they were just going to continue to die or whatever. And so he forsook his job with the quiet, like that whole sequence where they're talking, and we see the vision of Doraica and his mother, right? And how he has to like cannibalize his mom when he doesn't want to because he's called Little Egg at the time, and he has to kill her essentially to survive. Like these visions that he's having at the very end as the radiation or the disruption of light or whatever washes over and finally destroys Ushara and Meudinar is a sequence that will live rent free. I went and listened back to it, and I'm probably good. Like when I want to have that sort of sense again, I will go back to that chapter. I think it's called, I can't remember which chapter it is, but I will go listen to that whole sequence again consistently because it is absolutely amazing.
It shows, the failure of the Watchers, like it takes a reminding, these things were supposed to be, guardians of creation and support of it, and they betrayed that. And, there's an arrogance to that distorts, this whole reality into this massive evil. It starts with the fall of those two Watchers that sends this historical series of things cascading into effect. Is because they abandoned their literal God-given purpose. It comes with Meduinar that, like he wanted something other than what his task was. And it corrupted and destroyed the universe essentially almost twice. Like just really amazing. There's a lot of commentary about free will and purpose and stuff in here that I'm sure we'll get to later, but it's a wonderful conclusion to.
And then they just disappear. That's the other thing too. It's like they just end, the conversation ends and they're gone.
Yeah.
And Hadrian has this moment of, he asks if he is a bad man and nobody says anything and he weeps. It's just like, for a moment that has been built up to so much throughout all of these books, this sequence is perfect. I would not change a single thing about it. It is so perfect and so well earned. I don't have words to describe the rush that was to go through it. I think it's like 5 or 6 chapters that begin with the top of Darantune to, him getting to this ending sequence, and then the sigh of relief afterward.
Yeah, it has to be experienced to understand, in truth. Yeah.
So I want to pause on plot there, because the last thing I want to talk about is the ending.
Okay.
in particular, and we'll come back to plot and how it relates. But let's take a moment to talk about the characters in particular.
Yeah.
And who better to start with than Hadrian Marlowe himself?
My man,
throughout
yeah.
this book.
Man, Hadrian is, like I said, a different version of himself in every book. And in this book, he's got this, divine purpose in this book. He's very sure of himself for the most part. Although there's still some doubt, some trying to get around what he's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. He is firmly aligned with, the quiet at this point. And this book is really about, his grappling with what he has to do and finally giving his will into it. He's not quite the villain that history's made him out to be, but he's had to do a really hard thing. It's an emotional book because of his relationships. Hadrian is got much more emotionally on display in this book because of his interactions with his daughter, which are even better in this book than the last book. The sequence that made me cry involves him having to say goodbye to his daughter. You really feel that the relationship he has with his daughter was written by an actual father of a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So he feels like a father in this book. He feels like a hero in this book. He feels like a tragic hero in this book as well. He feels like the historical epic figure that he should at the end of this. And that's even exemplified even more. And we'll talk about that at the ending. He's really unbelievable in this. And the fight for his soul is the heart of this book. And it's a wonderful thing to see.
I've fallen in love with Hadrian more and more throughout the series.
Yeah.
And this is the true culmination of who Hadrian is. And he's not perfect.
By no means.
He is not Jesus. There is no analogy for him being this perfect figure that dies for our sins type character. He is deeply flawed, but he is a person that is being used and having to do very, very difficult things. And his pride gets in the way a lot of the time. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but his pride impacts and destroys lives to some extent in this book. But he's so well written, and I cannot wait till we get to this point in the series to sort of dive through. But the way that this is the Hadrian in Shadows Upon Time. This Hadrian is the one that is the narrator throughout all of the books. So now as we continue our read through of Empire of Silence and beyond, we have to understand that the Hadrian at the end of this book is the one who's writing the story.
Yeah.
Not the Hadrian that we've seen in Demon in White or Howling Dark or Kingdoms of Death or Disquiet Gods for that matter. This Hadrian is the narrator that is telling us the tale. So we need to keep that in mind. It's already starting to color different things.
Yeah.
As I've gone back to Empire of Silence in preparation for future episodes. We could talk about Hadrian all day, but let's give some shine. There's some criticism online that talks about the other characters in the series sort of take a back seat. I think part of that is narratively framing related. This is an autobiography. It's not an unbiased tale. It's told from one person's perspective, and this person is a very, very important person in the history of this universe, but somebody who has written very, very well universally. And Rocchio's favorite character that isn't named Hadrian or Valka to write, because I asked him this question, is Lorien.
Yeah.
And Lorien in this book is uniquely himself. I love the idea. One, he does not die at the end of this book, which I love the fact that he survives. Lorien surviving is such a good decision for me because he is the only one that ties him back to the Red Company.
Yeah.
But also, we've been with him for so long and we've come to love Lorien. And you probably loved Lorien even more than me because I haven't read Dregs.
Yeah, Lorien's great.
Lorien is such an incredible character. The idea that came up, I think it's toward the beginning of the book, after the Battle for the Demiurge part, when Hadrian realizes that if Hadrian were to fail at some point, Lorien would be the one that the Quiet would use, is awesome. Oh, I love that. Because I kind of want the pseudo, I mean, I know Rocchio doesn't like fanfic, but I kind of want to see the pseudo fanfic of okay, how would Lorien have approached this problem differently? Because he is a very, very different character. He's a foil to Hadrian in a lot of ways. Yeah. He's tactically way more smart. He is a demoniac in Hadrian's eyes. He is not the best physical fighter. Hadrian likes to hit problems head on and face them that way, and I'm going to sacrifice myself out of this sort of pride. And Lorien is the opposite. Lorien is practical. Lorien is the one telling him at the end of this book that, hey, you need to go to Earth to fight the Chantry with this ship. You have all the power. You're the one that could do it, right? You're the one that could end this reign by the Chantry today if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I love Lorien as like a mirror to Hadrian in a lot of ways. He kind of is the opposite of Hadrian in a lot of ways, but in not in a bad way. You know,
He
not in the way that Doreica is like the opposite of Hadrian,
he
because they're
really
actually kind of the same.
He really calls us to the history of the series as well throughout this. I will say also, Rockio has written his own fan fiction for his own series. There's a short story that's like that with all sorts of inaccuracies and stuff like that. It's
Oh,
hilarious.
really?
Yeah, it's fantastic. But yeah, Lorien he calls us back, to two kingdoms of death and reminds the
Yeah.
reader of you have a duty to avenge our people. Like it's
Yeah.
very easy for me, going into this, Kingdoms of Death was several books ago.
Yeah.
But it is our remember the Alamo kind of thing, with this book. It reminds us, that there's a debt to pay, and Lorien and Hadrian are kind of it at this point. I mean, they're the only ones that were even from that era. Every time Lorien showing up was on the line, it felt very important to me, very impactful, whether or not he was going to show up. And I think the thing that was coolest about Lorien throughout this book is he had a lot of reasons to not show up, and he just continually showed up when he needed to because it was the right thing to do. And even though he could have, a lot of people maybe wouldn't because they didn't owe it to anybody, but he did it anyway, even though it wasn't
Lorien has already, prior to this book, given everything to Hadrian, right?
Yeah.
Like he made it very clear in Disquiet Gods that I'm not going to sacrifice myself for you anymore.
Yeah.
But his decision to come back, and that being tied to Valka and the Red Company, is such a great decision.
Yeah.
He's such a badass. When you think that he's dead, he rides a freaking supernova to escape, and like they send like a scout ship out because their comms have blown out because he had this crazy batshit idea to ride the supernova of the sun to escape the battle, because he's battling. The thing that gives Hadrian the okay to do Astrophage is Lorien battling Mutinar in space, or Ushara, I think it's Mutinar. He's battling Mutinar in space to sort of like occupy them as this whole thing is happening. Like he's so important.
He's also got like the funniest moment, I think maybe in the series for me. I laughed out loud when I read it, which is when he's alive and they're having a conversation. He's like, and he said, "How did he live?" And the guy's like, well, he said, and Hadrian's like, "Let me guess." He said, "I'll tell you another time." It's just so funny calling back to Demon in White. It's just great. Hadrian and Lorien in some ways are kind of like the last like friendship that we have, and it's a very complicated one at this point, but I still felt it every time it was it worked for me the entire time. I'm not sure if it worked for everyone, but it did for me. And I definitely recommend folks read, The Dregs of Empire. You get a whole book with him. And so, reading that and then experiencing him past that point in the series has been very rewarding to see, the character exist after spending extra 300 pages with him alone.
I am confident that in the continued Sun Eater stuff, Lorien will show up again. Hadrian may not. Lorien
might, or at least legends about him or something.
Yeah, we're going to hear more about Lorien in the future in expanded Sun Eater stories. So I'm excited to see more about that, and I'm excited to read Dregs because whenever we get there,
it's fun.
My favorite character in this book, and maybe my favorite side character in the entire series, is William the 23rd. William in this book is inflicted with the virus that gives him cancer all over his body. He is in this weird stasis that allows him to speak through a machine from his thoughts as if he's dreaming sometimes. And the most badass portion of the entire book is when he gets out, knowing that he's like got a year to live because he can't stop the virus at this point. And he makes one of the guys from the Chantry join him in his like secluded bubble and kiss his ring to give him the cancer.
It's insane. It's so crazy. It's unbelievable.
Every moment that William is involved in this book, I was just pounding my chest. Like, this guy is trying his best the entire time. He's pushing back against Alexander and the Chantry openly. Right? He makes Hadrian Octor, and he tells Hadrian that at the end of the book, he tells Hadrian, no, you, cousin, need to be. This is the other friendship that Hadrian realizes that he has in this moment. Like, William now sees him not as a subject. William, and I don't think William has for some time, but like this is the moment that Hadrian realizes that William sees, almost in like a Roman imperial sort of succession type way. He is the emperor that Hadrian, he is choosing Hadrian to reign in his stead because he believes Hadrian is the one that can continue his legacy of trying to break down these structures that have held back the Imperium for so long. Ultimately, an extremely tragic figure too, because he doesn't get to realize all this work that he's put in for 1,000 years. He ends up dying in this battle as a result of what happens in the battle.
So
of
amazing.
Culloden.
There are a couple of moments that stood out for me. He's just, throughout the entire book, he's one of the best characters. I mean, the best emperor figure I've ever read. So cool. There was two moments that, other than the ones that you've mentioned thus far, when he apologizes to Hadrian. I really felt that, when I experienced that moment, I was thinking, like, I'm wondering if the emperor intended to upset Hadrian if he did these things, but he explains to Hadrian, interestingly enough, that he just didn't get it because he's never had what Hadrian had with Volca. And I it's crazy. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know how that hadn't occurred to me, but to spend that long alive and alone in that way, and just to try to be a good emperor as much as you can, is pretty wild. What a towering figure for the series. The other moment that really hit me was when the emperor bows to Hadrian, when he oh my gosh. Just, there's so much power in this character. I mean, it's just, he's one of the highlights of the series for me now after this book. He's truly unbelievable. He really gets some highlights in Ashes of Man.
Mm-hmm.
But this book, I mean, just takes it, runs with it. I mean, he's a heroic character in a way that is different than any other character that I've read. He's wearing the crown in a good way, which is fascinating. We see so many evil kings and stuff like this in fiction that I don't actually know if I recall like a good king character. He does it really well. It was a really brilliantly written character. Yeah. It's just, it's great. I mean, what an unbelievable character. I mean, he's one of the best characters in the book. I mean, Hadrian's the star, but I mean, man, the emperor is like really close to even Hadrian. That's how good his character is in this book. It's pretty wild.
Larger than life, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
On the flip side, we have the one who is desperately trying, along with his backers, to take over the crown, and it is the villain of Hadrian's own making, Alexander, who gets a lot of screen time in this book.
Yeah. He
becomes progressively more and more and more villainous and more evil. At the end of the book, he ends up calling his sister a whore, right? He has descended beyond all pretense of being like his father anymore. He realizes that he doesn't want to take the mantle of William the 23rd, and William isn't going to give it to him because he doesn't see Alexander as the opportunity to continue the legacy. He's going to revert back to this control and be satisfied with the fact that he has the power. He is mustache twirlingly evil in the best way. He's a better politician than Hadrian is.
Yeah.
He is very sneaky. He orchestrated that whole strike on that town on Culloden to make Hadrian look bad. He tries to stop Hadrian at every turn. When Hadrian's meeting with the emperor, he shows up and he tries to have the Martian guard and the excubitors or whatever stop. And then when Hadrian tells because there's that confrontation between the Martian guard and Alexander in the Chantry, and Hadrian and the emperor's protectors, and they're going to fight each other, and then Alexander tells them to stand down and they don't, and then Hadrian tells them to stand down and they just instinctively listen to him, showing everybody in that room who really is going to be on that throne. Their interplay throughout this book in particular, and it was all set up, starting in Demon White, very beautifully.
Yeah. There's something
But Alexander is a character, the villain of Hadrian's making.
Yeah.
Hadrian created Alexander.
He created him, but Alexander continually chose to be this. It is a weak man that cannot grow past the things that another person has said about them in a single moment. He made an active decision to hold on to this and lean into it and not let it go for them. I mean, as long as Alexander has lived, he has no excuse for lack of time to try to become better than this.
Yeah.
There are moments that we see kind of peek through which show us in and what I think is like one of the best ways to display the tragedy of a villain is that Alexander could have been a good man. Like we see moments where he's commanding and he's intelligent and he's creative and he's brave even. You know, he stands up to Hadrian when Hadrian is this larger than life figure. Hadrian says that he's brave for doing it. Alexander could have been different in a different situation, having made different choices, being more forgiving, able to let go of things. And so he becomes a tragic, twisted person. And by the end of this novel, I'm really buying Alexander being the twisted, terrible final emperor of the empire. I mean, it feels exactly who should be on the throne as it falls. He's an unbelievably good villain. In previous books, I didn't know what would happen with Alexander, and most of the work with Alexander is done in this book, and he becomes a larger than life villain. I really buy his character by the end of it. He's very memorable in this book. I mean, he's going to be he's one of my favorite characters in the series after reading this. Yep. He's really great.
The way that we'll talk more about the ending, but the way that Alexander is displayed in this book, we need to take with a fine-tooth comb when we start Demon in White and get introduced to him for the first time to see the descent, right? Because I'm sure there are pieces that we're missing, having only read through it once, that were present from the moment that Hadrian had that inciting moment against him.
Yeah.
Saying that he was annoying or whatever.
My favorite archetype of villain is a Stephen King villain that I won't spoil because it would be a spoiler. The men, they could have been good men, but aren't. It's one of my favorites. It's so good because that's kind of like how a lot of real life villains are. We have the capacity to be a good version of ourselves, and we're not because of our decisions. So,
and similar to how the Watchers manipulated the Cielson over thousands of years, who is the one that's whispering in his ear? The Chantry. The Chantry have cast their lot with Alexander being the emperor. They get a bunch of additional development, and we sort of get Hadrian has this instinctive venom when the Chantry comes up from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Right? We're in Empire of Silence right now, and he hates the Chantry and always has hated the Chantry. And he can express some of the reasons why, but those reasons become justified in Shadows Upon Time. We find out that they are not only hypocritical about technology, they don't only hoard technology, they don't just see Hadrian as a threat because he's this religious figure. No, he is a threat not because of him being this religious figure, but rather because he has the ability to expose what they've done. The realization that they had covered up the fact that Forum had been dead for 2 years, and the Emperor finds out about this, is incredible. And it goes to show them, like, we'll never know how much influence the Chantry truly has. And that's another element that we have to factor into our second read through of, okay, how is the Chantry manipulating the situation?
Yeah.
Right? How are they using their technology, their AI? Because essentially we come to find out that everything we know about Earth is wrong. Earth is fine. Like, we didn't talk about Here Soon Changed, who is one of the captains that shows up when the Latarans show up on the ship, but basically Here Soon Changed is a former Chantry prior, right? Or like high up in the Chantry, and exposes the lies that the Chantry has held for so long. Earth is fine. It is the Americani never really went away. They just became the Chantry, which I think is a beautiful sort of depiction in real life. There's this theory in history that institutions don't ever die. They just change into something else, right? There's the idea that the Roman Empire never really died. It became the Roman Catholic Church. There's the idea that the British Empire never really died. It became the London Central Bank. And I love this idea and this theory of history that the Americani never really died. They just became the Chantry. The Americans that were taking over and using their AI to control the people who really had the strings attached to the Americani above never really got out of power. They just hid themselves better.
You know, there's a moment that really displayed, I think, the evil of the Chantry very well, which was this moment where, you know, there's Cielson, there's all sorts of things clashing on this ship, and there are these, I can't recall if it was, I think it may have been some of this cybernetically modified Cielson leap at one of this Black Knight of the Chantry or whatever, and he raises his hand and the whole thing falls dead. And Hadrian has this internal, it's like they had the ability to fight these type of things the entire time, and did not use it to save humanity. And
Yep.
there's this evil present with the allowing that the Chantry has done with the technology that they had access to. They were using it to play shadow games instead of saving humanity. I am very much looking forward to Arc 2 of the Sun Eater universe where the Chantry is the main villain, because if that's part of it, because it's unbelievable, and we get, like a figurehead for the Chantry that is very menacing and creepy and all this. And I loved the Chantry, that this is sort of an archetypal villain that's present in other works, Batman folks. This is the Court of Owls for this universe. This sort of unfaced organization that controls everything behind the scenes. I also really enjoy
Spectre and James Bond,
yeah.
like the evil cabal, right?
Yeah,
love an evil cabal.
It's great. It's so fun, and I love the trajectory that we're taking on over the course of the series. At first the Chantry's evil, and then we kind of get it in Howling Dark, because holy crap, the Extrasolarians are creepy and terrible and inhuman, and then we get this whiplash effect where we're like really kind of like, maybe the Chantry have a point. In this book, we're like, oh, the Chantry super don't have a point. Like they're super hypocrites. I loved it to have this surprise villain at the end of the series. It's another turn that was taken. I'm looking forward to seeing more of the Shadow Kingdom if that's going to happen. I think it's one of the coolest things that happens, and it's the right thing to consider it a character in this section, because they've really become a full-fledged character in this
Yod
series.
alone, like the first Yod dies right on the ship, and then his body comes back, and Hadrian is like, what the? So they have like Karn Cigar, or Minos level technology where they can project into a new body or whatever. It's just genius.
Yod, for some reason, I don't know why this character leapt into my mind when I started hearing about Yod, but the Conviction arc of Berserk has this terrifying priest figure at the head of the Conviction arc. Yod gives me vibes of that guy.
Maybe not as physically imposing, but definitely the religious aspect.
The religious terror associated with it. I think it's like Mosgus or something like that. Yeah, Yod gives
He's an apostle. Yod is an apostle.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's fantastic.
I don't want this in a book. Hear me out. I want the FromSoft game, Sun Eater FromSoft game, where you play as Cassandra, and Cassandra goes and overthrows Earth, like takes down the Chantry and overthrows Earth. And you're fighting these Lovecraftian cybernetic horror monsters and these crazy, crazy priest villains.
That'd be fun.
Like, that's what I want.
That'd be great.
But the main villain of this story, and the one that we get closure on more than the others, although, when we talk about the ending, we can discuss a little bit more, are the Watchers. I don't think we have much to say here because we've talked about them a fair bit, but how Rocchio thought about the Watchers. There is an apocryphal book that is actually referenced in Genesis called the Book of Enoch, and in particular, First Enoch, that is getting a lot of play in our zeitgeist currently, because there are some people that are talking about this apocryphal biblical text, mainly because it's actually referenced in chapter 6 of Genesis or something like that, talking about the Nephilim. And the Nephilim are these, it's never explained in scripture what that means. And so it's always been this sort of interesting conspiracy theory level, what does the Nephilim mean? But the Book of Enoch, First Enoch in particular, which is the Book of the Watchers, discusses this theory that angels fell, 12 angels fell, and they copulated with they chose human women and copulated with them and taught sort of like in a Promethean-esque way. They taught humanity knowledge, forbidden knowledge, and they are struck down by angels eventually. But the Watchers that show up in this series are very much influenced by First Enoch and this sort of apocryphal text in the series, and that I will definitely bring up more when we talk about chapter 40 of Disquiet Gods in particular, and when we get there years and years and years from now. But how Rocchio thought these beings might think, that scene that we talked about, the discussions that he's talking when Mutinar is calling him kinsman and they're showing him these visions and Ushar and all this different stuff, how he conceptualized these beings is really incredible. It's Lovecraftian. It is religious. It rings potentially true because we deal with the theoretical scientific aspects of what higher dimensional beings are, right?
Yeah.
how he brought all of this together is truly amazing, because we deal with them and their horror. I guess we deal with their horror the most in this part of the series,
Yes.
in this book. This is Hadrian's battle for the soul. It's his battle against them, and it's the quiet battling against the Watchers. I have no idea how he got to write these things so well.
It brings a scale to the story that wouldn't be present without them.
Yeah.
Without this, we have ships shooting at each other and stuff. And with them, we have cosmic hands reaching out and crushing ships in their fingers. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. They really elevate the series above just space opera about a fight between an alien race and humans. It's a bigger payoff than the initial promise of the series. It's really unbelievable. I love that there are two of them, and we get sort of a display of each of them. They kind of have their own kind of personality, although they're both twisted in their own ways. Ushar is this manipulative, trolling, taking pleasure in suffering entity, this horrible thing. Meduanar is this, horrifying, world-destroying influence from the Cielson, has this vision thing that he can create lies, and so it's amazing. I also appreciate that they're kind of given motivations at the end there, when we get some background on their fall and stuff. They become more fully fleshed out characters than just like faceless cosmic entities. We know them a little bit more than we would know like a Lovecraftian monster, for example. We don't know Cthulhu the way we know the Watchers. So they're great. That we start hearing about them earlier in the series, we get their end, and we get to know a lot more. They're great characters in and of themselves, and they're in the story so much. So it's a good thing that they're good characters. They're great.
I need somebody to translate the Cielson in those chapters, because they speak in, I assume it's Cielson. In some of those, like, this must be, like, when they're having their conversations and we're seeing these visions, we get a lot of what I think is Cielson language that I don't think is just directly translated into the English that goes underneath it. I think that there's more there that he is laying for us. So I need a Cielson dictionary stat.
I don't think it's Cielson. It doesn't look the same when I read it. I can't tell.
It may not be. It may be like the language that it may be an even deeper language or whatever.
Yeah.
But we need a translation for those pieces. And I'm sure that by the time that we get there, we'll have something better. They're awesome. Now, I want to sort of shift to characters that maybe get a bad rap, and maybe we could talk about that. Like, we talked about Doriaika a little bit previously, and maybe this is intentional, and I think it is intentional, but especially the sequence when he dies and sort of joins with Mutinar or whatever. I expected like the Battle of Danu 2.0, where Hadrian, this is a subverting of expectations. I guess we go into Darentune thinking that we're going to get this satisfying battle, sword fight or whatever, and that is the opposite of what happens here. Doriaika is decrepit and old and gone and dies unceremoniously. I think that is intentional.
100%. There's, when I first read it, I was kind of torn, because we do get the epic sword fight with Doriaika. It just happens on Danu. So we get that experience, but he also gets to make his point, I think, about, the image that I'm left with is, he's crumpling to stone as his followers are kneeling and dead in front of, I mean, it's like the whole thing falls apart in the same way, if we'll remember that the previous servants of Meduan are all off themselves at the end after failing to destroy reality. So he was always going to have something like this for this. He's very much in this evil is destructive. It can't create anything. They just destroy or iterate off of things that are already done. So I think it drives that point home. And it's not as if, Doriaika isn't tied up with the end of Meduanar and stuff like that. He really is. He's kind of present there.
But he's not driving the boat.
No.
Right? Like, he's not in the driver's seat.
And not at all. And I think that's kind of the point, is we're supposed to take that. So I actually, upon reflection and as we have this conversation, I actually really appreciate it. I think it makes it an important point. I could see some people being disappointed by it, but we got the sword fight we wanted, and we also got the interesting point Rocky was trying to make. So I actually feel pretty good about it. I think Doriaka's big shining moment is Kingdoms of Death. That's where we get him. But the longer he gets influenced, I think he really kind of becomes less Cielson. I mean, frankly, as he's more influenced by this thing, he becomes this thing that isn't even him anymore. It's even on the battle at Danu, he doesn't feel like the same character. You know, he's this like
Mhm.
half frozen in stone thing that is less of what he was. So
Being consumed.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I really like it as a development. He is very different, but I think it's a good difference. You know, if I want to see that version of Doriak, I'll go read Kingdoms of Death again. The glory, terrible King of the Cielsons.
Another character I wanted to bring up in this section was Selene and her sort of writing. I will say, if I had one criticism of the book, and this may be changed by a theory that's going around that I want to subscribe to, but she's so tragic. And I love her. Like, I want them to be together so bad. Like, I feel just totally blue-balled at the idea that, like, at the end of the book, we'll talk about her end in just a minute, but they don't end up in this fairy tale. Like, he says after their marriage or whatever, that they never ended up having the life that she wanted. Her empire was never realized.
Yeah.
And their love and their relationship was never realized. And I actually really didn't like the Volca forgive me. Like, it is too much. Like, I don't know the scope of life and what it would be like on that scale, but like, I feel like Hadrian would have moved on at least a little bit. Like, like the idea of a blended family doesn't exist. Like, come on.
He's melodramatic, man. He's in love forever. He's in love forever, bro.
Like, his daughter loves Selene. That's the other thing too, is like Cassandra is team Selene. She never knew her mom, and that's tragic. And she gains a relationship with her mom in the book, but she's like pro, like, Dad, this woman's great. Like, what are you doing? And Adrian's just like, don't forgive me, welcome, forgive me. I'm just like, just kiss her, dude.
He's
kiss her and enjoy it.
He's got a guilty conscience related to women in some ways, you know, even from his young child, you know. So I forgive him for his silliness, but it's like, you know, there's theories going around about Selena surviving, you know, there's like mentions here and there, and about, you know, like whether or not someone's with him there on Colchist and stuff. And I need to re-examine.
That's the theory I want to subscribe to, is that all of this talk that he has about Selene at the end of the book in particular is protecting her because she is with him and they are away from the influence of Alexander.
Yeah.
That
would be really cool if that were the case. I hope
that's true.
That would be really cool if it were the case. I'm also okay if it's not. I'm kind of a sadistic with books. I like horribly tragic ends and stuff like that. It's good. You know, we'll talk about it more at the ending.
She's a badass in this book too.
She's awesome.
She's like a real badass.
She's awesome. She's really cool. Have you seen The Green Knight? You know that movie?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite movies because I love the end. So like, I love, you know, like kind of dark ends and stuff like that. If it turned out to be the case that she's actually alive and with Hadrian, the thing that's cool to me about that is actually not that she's alive, but the fact that the author is communicating it to the audience in that particular way by hiding it. That's super cool. So I'll have to do some digging and look at the actual evidence for it to see if I buy into it. I don't want to be wishful thinking with fan theories and stuff like that. But if it turns out that there's good pieces coming together, that's a really cool theory. That'd be really fun.
To be clear, I really love the character.
She's great.
I just want her to have a happy ending.
Oh yeah, totally.
She's pure-hearted, like actually pure-hearted.
She's great. I really started to buy him or her and Hadrian really in Disquiet Gods. I really started to buy them. So yeah, it would be cool if they got some kind of happily ever after-ish, at least. That would be nice.
Yeah. The final character I wanted to bring up here, I mean, and do you have any characters you want to talk about before we end with Cassandra?
Yeah, I wanted to briefly touch on the Cielsen that are loyal to Hadrian in this book, because those characters,
Ramathanu,
and
Attila,
and their child,
or Autumna,
and those were some of the most interesting characters to me because they turn our feelings about the Cielsen kind of on their head a little bit throughout this book. You know,
the birth sequence alone is
unbelievable,
insane.
There's too much to discuss with these characters to do in this section, but the fact that the Cielsen first become loyal to him through his defeating of Ishara on Sabratha, he sort of gets a culturally appropriate intro to them from which he can then negotiate within their values using that, and then slowly moves them more and more towards his feelings. There's some issues with their values because of their values difference in the Archanis and stuff like that. Hadrian has some interesting decisions to make about granting them mercy because they're with child and everything. But the moment that really sells their humanity is when they have a child, and all of the Raccio managing to make me feel empathy for the creatures that were present in Kingdoms of Death is insane to me. because there's this moment when they have a child where there's all this shame that's culturally put on about the idea of having children. Like it's a bad thing. It's the same theme that sort of comes through with the genetic stuff that happens with the humans in this, in the Palatine. But it happens here with their child, where it's like it's supposedly a shameful thing to have children. But then we get this chapter that's wonderful. It's one of my favorite chapters in the book, Playing Pale, where the Sealson child is playing with human children, and they're
with the kids from Danu.
And they're playing, they're having fun, and it's acting, very human, and it's very moving. It was really surprising to me. It's like, what would these be like without the corrupting influence of the Watcher? I mean, like what would have happened if evil hadn't completely taken over their culture? We were given this idea really early on in the series that, the Sealson aren't redeemable. And at the end of this, we're like, damn, like what happens now with the Sealson?
Hadrian indicates in that too, that they are no longer Sealson, right? He says that they are something else.
Yeah.
I want to focus on Ramanthanu and Autumno in this because they were Sealson. Their child is something different, 100%.
Yeah.
Born into this environment and is being reared around children, right? So we can understand that the nurture side of things is going to be very different compared to being raised in Sealson society. I love the arc that Ramanthanu and Autumno have taken. At the beginning of this book, they're the only ones left standing. I think there were 3 at the beginning of the book.
There was one more, and one tries to kill Hadrian because of the power that Oshara has and like turns on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at that point, it is Ramanthanu and Autumno, and Ramanthanu is the sort of superior figure in this relationship, right? The one with the power, and thus like wields it over. And the only reason that Autumno initially follows Hadrian is because Autumno is a slave to Ramanthanu. Right?
Yeah.
And Ramanthanu is a slave to Hadrian. Ramanthanu and Autumno during the Irktani section of the book, when they're just trying to protect the baby, is a step in the direction of them becoming less Sealson. Another data point in this step too is when Ramanthanu, and because before that was a power dynamic. They wanted us to yield sort of thing, but also Autumno is with child. Like, so there's complexity to the situation with the Irktani. I'm telling him to stand down or whatever because they believe that themselves higher. But later in the book, when he's on the thing with I think he's on the Emperor's ship or whatever, or he's on another Imperial ship, and they come out and then they bend their knees and they're speaking in Dostani to the people right before it's in the sequence for the Battle of Gadadin. And they willingly like, no, we will kneel. We know, and they give their necks up and they kneel in front of these people. That's it. Earlier in the book, they had a whole thing where Irktani died because of this power dynamic struggle. And now they're faced with the vermin that they grew up believing were vermin, and they're willing to, because they believe it's the right thing, kneel in front of them because their leader that's telling them and taking them along this path, they see a future for their kid. Like they begin to see this future, that the Sealson can be something different, that the Sealson can follow the Quiet, or whatever the name for the Quiet is.
Yeah.
That the Quiet is the one who is superior. Like they begin to see the vision. Ramanthanu tragically dies in the book, and then it's just Autumno and the kid. But presumably Autumno at the end of the book is going to raise the child differently than you would have Sealson. So and Hadrian mentions explicitly, they are not Sealson anymore. They are different. They are something that is different. And a very interesting twist that I expected them to all die at some point in this book. Right? I never expected them to make it through. I never expected a Sealson kid.
Yeah, me neither.
And I never expected anybody outside of Ramanthanu to sort of like, because even at the beginning when Ramanthanu starts following Hadrian, it's all the power dynamic stuff. Like the Quiet is more powerful than the Watcher, so I must follow the Quiet. And Hadrian is the Doria, the child of the Quiet, or the chosen of the Quiet. But to see them start struggling and understand at the end of the book that like, no, Sealson were wrong. It's good. Like as they're watching their society crumble and the sun explode, and like everyone that they know and all the worlds that they know die, they think it is an act of good. Like they deserve that, and they don't want that for their child. They want their child to be something different, even if they don't see themselves as redeemable.
Yeah.
Even though they have shown steps toward that, is a fascinating thing. And a total inversion on the Sealson that we had seen in Howling Dark, right? The Cielson that we saw with Arenado Otiolo and
Yeah.
that whole power dynamic in the negotiations there, Hadrian actually ends up getting what he wanted at the very beginning of the book in a satisfying and earned way that makes sense with all the world building and the influence of the Watchers, right? Like, what would a Cielson be like without the influence of the Watchers? We'll figure out maybe with some additional stories told from the child's perspective.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. You know, the thing that shines through for me is people like getting onto the Cielson child, and the Cielson child doesn't even understand why people are worried because he's just playing the game with the kids.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's pretty powerful. I was not expecting
Yeah.
it at all, and some of my favorite characters of the book because of that. I'm really hoping that that is expanded on in the future. It'll be cool to see where it goes.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Finally, let's talk about Cassandra. So, my bias, I don't have a daughter yet. If all goes well, I'll have one by the time I reread this book for our podcast. But Cassandra, it plays a very prominent role in this book, and and my personal feelings toward Cassandra are she's a fleshed out, awesome fighter, and she's incredible. But I do wish to some extent that she had more, and maybe it's the framing device because of Hadrian only seeing his perspective of her. I'd like to know more about her. I want to know her about her and Albie. Right? I want to know what that relationship is like more. I think Disquiet Gods did a good job of talking about that and their sort of budding romance with old crusty Hadrian, right?
Yeah.
I wish I would have had more time with Cassandra, understanding her outside of the context of just trying to stop Hadrian from dying and killing himself a little bit. But maybe that's, it does leave space for Cassandra to become the main character in any expanded Sun Eater stuff, right?
It's so hard because, there are moments when, she's allowed to be her own character and have her autonomy, and Hadrian wants that and stuff like that. But also, Hadrian cannot escape the fact that he just doesn't want her to die as her dad. And, I'm trying to think about, as a father of a daughter, like, a strong, assertive, independent, like smart, capable daughter. And I want, her to be able to tackle the world of her own accord and everything. But I think a way a lot of us fathers and with daughters will probably find ourselves like, yeah, I want that in every case, except I'm going to be a hypocrite sometimes. and there's going to be points in which I say no. And I think that's what Hadrian finds himself caught in here a little bit. Is it like for all of the things he wants for her, he just will not allow her to go down with him. Like, I mean, he can't find himself allow it. And I think if she feels a little bit one note, I think it's because, he's a father that's continually put in this situation where this decision is constantly in front of him. I mean, is he gonna let her burn with everybody? Like, I mean, she is an adult and a warrior and capable of making that sacrifice for herself. And he's her dad, and he's not going to let her do it anyway. So I think it would be cool to get more with Cassandra in the future. There is some extended universe stuff with the short stories where we see a little more Cassandra, albeit at different times and stuff like that. Not like post Shadows Upon Time Cassandra or anything like that. So I would like to see more of her. I think, we're seeing her through Hadrian's eyes, and that's going to color it. So if she's weak in some ways, it's probably because of that. I will say, though, him saying goodbye to her made me cry. That was so hard to imagine having a daughter like this and not being able to see her grow up or be like, in a relationship, have kids, live her life, all of these things. So I think it's not an uncommon thing for people to express this about Cassandra. I do like that Cassandra has this kind of like, I'm not going to have my arm healed kind of thing. Like, I'm just going to...
I actually love that.
I think that's really cool. It adds a lot to her character, that she is very much just, living her life that way. And I think she's interesting. I think she fights with Hadrian, rightfully so. I don't disagree with her that she's a Jadian swordmaster. She can do whatever she wants and stuff like that. It's just dad happens to be space Jesus and he's not going to let it happen. So yeah, I
will say too, like from a narrative standpoint, looking through Hadrian's lens, he is doing this because he thinks it's the right thing and because the Quiet is commanding him to do it. But the real reason he actually is a deeper reason potentially is the fact that he wants a universe for her to exist in after.
Yeah.
And if I look through it through that lens, then maybe it makes sense that he makes the decisions that he does more. I'm interested to see more of Cassandra. I will say, I just thought of another pro thing that you could do in this From Software Cassandra game. You know, the trial that you have at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
When she brings it up a little bit here. Some of the trials that she faced to become in the ninth circle or
Very
whatever circle
vaguely,
she's
yeah.
in, very vaguely. There's your tutorial right there.
Yeah.
She's in the trial to become a Mystikalist. That's your tutorial for this From Software Cassandra game.
And it just beats you into the ground 10 times in the tutorial. It would be great.
Yeah,
It'd be fun.
There you go.
All right,
we've talked a long time, but let's power through some of the philosophical elements of this book, because there would be no interest in Sun Eater if there wasn't some philosophy that we discussed a bit.
The one that cuts through, I think, most clearly to me is about free will and choice. And it cuts through because of the destiny that Hadrian has from the start of the series to blow up the sun. There's some interesting, philosophy surrounding free will, determinism, like divine planner, and whether or not that inhibits free will and stuff. This is sort of touched on earlier in the book with the stones at Annika, like you intended to take the stone, so you couldn't lift it, but when you didn't take the stone, you could leave it, because if you intended to take the stone, that's impossible, because the stone has to be returned to the wall or whatever. There's some interesting philosophy about choosing and free will. There's an interesting thought experiment I was exposed to in my philosophy in my undergraduate stuff about free will, which is that if you are gambling with a mafia guy, okay, and you're playing poker, and you beat him in you beat him in a series of hands, you lose a series of hands, you make free choices the entire time, but there was like a mafia guy right outside the door that was ready to burst in to not allow you to make the opposite choice you made, but you never chose that option, so you get to choose freely the whole time. Did you have free will in that situation? Essentially, it's like, if you couldn't have chosen different, but you still made all of those choices, do you still have free will or not? And some people think that you can have free will, even though you couldn't have chosen differently. And with the divine entity, that can set people in situations knowing what decisions they would make, for example, you can have this strange situation where you have a set future but still free choice. In this universe, we're kind of given this kind of dual vision where there's sort of like a destiny kind of component, but you have free will within that sort of destiny kind of thing happening. You're always going to end up eating the sun, but the folks that are there with you may be a little bit different kind of vibe. But ultimately,
he didn't see Orphan, right? He didn't see Orphan in that vision.
Right. So he had effect on things. He just couldn't change everything. And I will say, included in the ethics of this universe, he technically could have chosen differently. He would have just had to destroy the egg when he was at the end of time, right? And it would have been given to him. So he was still given a choice, but you have to pick up your cross, and it's going to happen the way I want it to happen. But if you don't want it to happen, I'll give it to somebody else. It'll be somebody else's cross to bear. But if you're going to bear it, it has to happen this way, because I know best. And so even amidst the destiny, he's given a choice within the ethics of this universe. It's just an unpleasant choice. He ultimately decides it's worth it to be around his daughter to make this terrible choice. It's very fascinating ethical considerations about free will in this series. It's very complex. It's not just a single deterministic or free will. It's a mixed approach, which I really like.
Evil is explored a lot throughout the series, and in addition to this free will side of things, the problem of evil becomes a central theme throughout the entire book, right? The Cielsen is evil, the Watchers is evil. Kingdoms of Death deals with a lot of, the negative side of the problem of evil, like how could the Quiet let this happen type situation. There's a theodicy, which is a defense for the problem of evil, and a defense for a monotheistic God in the context of evil, one of which is the soul-making theodicy, which I think is dealt with a lot throughout Sun Eater, particularly the idea that going through hardship and these difficult things is what, refines a soul to make the right choices. We see that with Hadrian a lot, even when he's talking to Bassander Lin, right? At the end of the book, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but he says, seek hardship. And there's this idea that by going through these hard events and the evil existing, not because God doesn't want evil to exist, but as a result of evil existing, God can use it, or the Quiet can use it to make somebody more virtuous, right?
Yeah.
That's basically the only path to additional virtue. It sort of rings true to some extent, because your values are only your values until you are faced with an ethical quandary, right? They don't, the moment that they're faced with any resistance, that's where you really know where the values lie.
It's an interesting question. We have a theistic kind of figure in the series in the Quiet. It's a very evil kind of universe in some ways. So there's a lot of evil present in it, I should clarify to say. The problem of evil is something that's continuously brought up in, philosophy of theism versus atheism and stuff like that. Essentially, it boils down to, there's this logical version of the problem of evil, which essentially says that a entity of divine nature would have an obligation
an all-knowing and all-powerful God
would eliminate evil insofar as it could. And if it's not doing that, then therefore it's lacking one of the divine traits, essentially. The hang-up comes with this idea that it would eliminate evil insofar as it could. And that turns into an evidentiary problem. It's a different argument. But essentially the idea is, does God have a good reason for evil existing? And we're sort of given a picture over the course of this series about, the ugliness of the world, so to speak. And, there's no heroism without evil. There's all sorts of things that could not exist in a world without evil. There's all sorts of things that couldn't exist in a world if we couldn't light a house on fire through our irresponsibility. We couldn't learn what it is to be responsible, to constrain ourselves, and therefore we couldn't be a type of being that would be responsible and to constrain ourselves from bad consequences and stuff. So there's all sorts of things that come from adding evil and tragedy into the world that may justify its existence. And there's some of this series is kind of an argument about, like, in a display of how that works. I also think
a big part of it is going back to the Cielson's ethic versus the Quiet's ethic is a very Gnostic versus material world ethic, right?
Yeah.
Creation is inherently good versus creation is inherently bad.
Yeah. I also think, there's some interesting exploration of the way that a divine entity changes the ethics of a situation. Like, we have this weirdness that happens with, like, if a man chose to blow up a sun and make this decision, does the ethics change when it's a divine entity commanding it or something like that? There's some discussion in the book itself about, the Quiet giving a long period of time for the Cielson to do differently. Like, they could have, this happened when it happened because there was essentially only judgment left at this point. There was nothing left for them. This is a sort of Old Testament kind of moment in the Sun Eating series. This is like, like a flood moment, or, destroying cities in the Old Testament or something like that, because there's nothing left to preserve at that point. So, this is in some ways an Old Testament kind of value, but there's this whole, like, weird controversial section of philosophy about divine command theory, which is like this idea that, like, with an entity that can consider all the ethics, all the possible situations, you can have, like, a weird, on its face appearing horrible decision makes sense because of all of the knowledge of the situation and stuff. I would also say in this series, we sort of skirt around that a little bit, because this seemingly terrible act is downplayed a little bit by the fact that the Cielson killed this planet in the first place and all this stuff. So there's not as big of a bullet bitten here with that, but it's also asking questions about this kind of a thing. Like, why would a God want this kind of a thing to happen? So it's asking interesting questions like that as well.
Some other high-level philosophical things that we'll dive more deeply into as the series goes on, but the series really exemplifies Rocchio's opinions on heroes, right? The great man theory of history in a pretty realistic way. Hadrian is not a Gary Stu. He is very flawed, and his decisions lead to pain for a lot of people, right?
Yes.
But we shouldn't necessarily throw out Hadrian's heroic virtues and elements that should be lauded in that. So there's a theory in history that history wouldn't exist without certain great men being as influential. So examples that I can think of, right? The way that we look at George Washington, right? George Washington was a slave owner, and half of his teeth were slave teeth, right? The other half were wooden or horse teeth, and half were slave teeth. Ethically, we can say that, yes, George Washington as a slave owner was a bad thing. Ethically bad, morally bad, terrible. Probably abused his slaves, no doubt. But without George Washington as a character, our country, which values virtue, that has the First Amendment, that exists as a bastion of, like, the Constitution wouldn't exist and our country wouldn't exist had George Washington not been the general that was responsible for the Continental Army.
Mm-hmm.
Or another example is Winston Churchill is he's less controversial, but he's not a perfectly good guy. I mean, he's gluttonous. He's not a great strategic mind necessarily when he is in the First World War, but has a lot of heroic elements to him that sort of become mythologized to some extent. But he's a big reason that Britain survived and was a bastion against Nazi Germany. The reason that Nazi Germany didn't take over and win against Britain and take over all of Western Europe was in big part due to the way that Churchill led. So Hadrian is sort of an answer to, previous books like Dune, where heroes are sort of seen as a societal evil, full stop. Like there's nothing really redeeming about them. Hadrian is the antithesis of that to some extent, because although Hadrian does bring great pain and suffering, Hadrian does open the door for a better world to be created. It's just not his job, right? Like, we'll talk about that with the ending here a little bit.
Yeah.
The other piece, institutionally, right? Institutions are pretty evil in Rocchio's philosophy here, the Chantry being the biggest one.
Yeah.
Right. And the Empire to some extent too, right? There's a lot of thing about the Sullan Empire that, I think he gets a bad rap, Rocchio, in some cases, people not reading into it enough or not reading closely enough. But the Sullan Empire is not an institution to be applauded in many cases. The sexual ethic in the empire is very flawed and very wrong. The power dynamics and the fact that there are people that exist that only are meant to be serfs for all eternity and their family to be serfs for all eternity. It's not a good thing. I mean, Hadrian multiple times throughout Empire of Silence, as far as we've gotten, has said, we are less human as Palatines than these people. And so the genetic ethics of the empire are not to be seen as something that is a good thing. But they're all held up by institutions, right? And with those institutions, the power that those institutions bring, that inherently sort of corrupts most people. It takes very special great men, a la William the 23rd or Hadrian, to sort of push against that.
Yeah, and I think that, our big special historical figures here are meant to be portrayed as about as good as we can be as people, right? Which is to say we're very imperfect and make all kinds of mistakes and can do great things alongside those mistakes if we're good people. I think that's the whole point, right? Is like they're supposed to be portrayed as imperfect and just trying to do the best they can. And, I think there's something to the fact that, the series portrays, like when we look back on historical figures and have a modern criticism, that's fine, that's valid and stuff like that. But if you're born the emperor here, you only have so many moves on the chessboard, right? It's not as if you can just move off the chessboard and pretend like you've made a good decision or something like that. People are constrained. Because
somebody's going to fill that vacuum.
People are constrained by circumstances, and pretending like that's not the case is really, I think, immature. It doesn't mean that things aren't wrong or anything like that. It's just like we just, when we're talking about being at the end of this series, I mean, Hadrian really had like a bunch of bad choices, and you try to just make the best choice you can with the information you have, the values you were born with, and in the situation that you're in. And that's all we have, and we're going to mess up in all kinds of ways. In 50 years, people may look back on us and think we're insane for eating animals. It just, and we just don't know what we're wrong about because we can't see in front of our own face when we're in the middle of it. And so we just do the best we can. And that's what the characters are doing here for the most part. So they're just doing the best they can. And they do a pretty good job. And it's really fun to watch them do a pretty good job. I also think skepticism towards institutions is cool. It's fun. Like we have not enough focus on individuality in some ways. And it's fun to watch, people do this. And frankly, if Hadrian Marlowe was given prescience in the Dune universe, maybe he would have had different views of the future because he's a better person than Paul Atreides. Maybe that's what it should have happened. And maybe Paul was trapped not because of prescience trapping him, but maybe he was trapped because he wasn't as good of a person as he could have been. Who knows? I like this version of the future history a lot. It's very inspiring. It's really cool.
Yeah, because for all our love of Dune, the message is not. It's a bleak message.
Yeah, it is
bleak. In most cases.
It is bleak.
There's a lot of bleakness in Sun Eater, but ultimately the message is morally a better one and a more uplifting one.
It's hopeful. Yeah, I agree.
And speaking of hope, I think it's the perfect time to end our discussion talking about the ending itself, because
Yes.
the story as we know it, Hadrian's ending is here, ostensibly.
Yep.
But the universe will continue on.
Yes.
So he returns to Tembu, which is where he had made a pit stop before going to Gadadin originally. This is where, after the emperor has died, he is going to make his announcement that he and Selene are married, and she believes that they're going to go and, take the reins of the empire now. Because, all right, so I thought the Nicephorus piece was genius.
Yeah.
So a reveal that we had was that when we thought that the emperor was giving Hadrian the keys to the empire, it was only partially true. We know that the genetic constellation is held by only accessible through the emperor's DNA and blood. And we find out that Nicephorus is 95% there or something like that genetically to the emperor himself. So it's sort of a stopgap in the event that we need to pass on the keys to the genetic kingdom onto the next leader. So Nicephorus and Selene find this out, and Nicephorus, Hadrian, and Selene go down to Tembu, and Temba, and they are wanting to, take over. Hadrian doesn't. Hadrian sees the game.
Yeah.
He knows that his time is up, but Selene and Nicephorus don't. And so they are going to take the keys to the kingdom, but they were met with the Martian Guard, a legion of Martians, with Yod, the Chantry, and Alexander, who is there to say, you killed the emperor. This is where that sort of narrative begins that we heard from the beginning of Empire Silence. Their line now, and the narrative that they're going to control, is that Hadrian is responsible for William the 23rd dying. And now Alexander is the emperor, bend the knee. And Hadrian says, no, he doesn't. Nicephorus, in a rare moment, talks back to Alexander and to the Chantry and is saying, hey, I can't believe that you would, do all this stuff. And he's talking down to the emperor and knowingly doing so. A legion, this is a genius part of a philosophical or real historical element too, is although there are great men in history, there are men whose names will never be remembered that do something that forever changes the future, right? And this is a case of that, where one legionary takes his gun, picks it up, and shoots Nicephorus in the head, not knowing that Nicephorus is the only key that exists to unlocking the genetic codes to the rest of the Palatine class.
Accidentally ends the empire.
And it is genius. I loved it when I read that.
Yep.
It's the Archduke Franz Ferdinand dying at the beginning of the First World War, right? That's the level of this thing here, but even on a bigger scale. Alexander gets pale white and realizes that this has happened and that his empire is gone. He is the last emperor that will exist. And he turns to that legionary and murders him in front of everybody. Hadrian gets taken away and put up in chains. He's visited by Basander Lin in this sort of Peter-esque way, right? Basander's like, hey, I can get you out right now. Let's go. We can go. And Hadrian's like, nope. I'm exactly where I need to be. Tells Basander, go, and, my fight's over, but yours is not. Continue, seek hardship, sort of gives him this benediction. And Basander Lin ends up becoming this religious figure, right? He is a follower of Hadrian, because Basander Lin's arc, basically since the end of Howling Dark, is he thinks that, Hadrian is the God Emperor reborn, right? He believes the half-mortal narrative, and even more so toward the end of the book, even though Hadrian tries to deny it. Hadrian is brought up to the stocks. It is raining outside. Alexander has this display of power, putting him in his place. You always wanted the throne. Hadrian has his head held high. Alexander stabs him. And then hangs him. The way that they had done the knots, or the tautness, was such that they wanted him to turn blue and suffer. But in the quiet's mercy, it snaps his neck, and Hadrian dies. And that's where the book ends. Hadrian says, there are endings, reader, and there are endings. And this is not one, because there are no endings anymore. Every one of us is a story, and the story never really ends. And earlier in the book, Lorien and one of his people had gotten a transmission that had 7 words on it that we never really get keyed into, that were handed to Hadrian. He reads them, and they're referenced a few times throughout, the battle, or after the battle, and he keeps thinking about them and bringing them up. We're just waiting on bated breath to find out what they are. And as Hadrian says, I've been writing too much, he keys us in on what those words were, and they are, Marlowe, Marlowe, where were you when I? And he accepts his fate. He dies. He's thinking about these words as he gets hung and his neck snaps and the book just ends. What did you think when you read that?
Oh, so perfect, dude. Oh, so perfect. As soon as I started seeing the pages counting down, I'm like, please end it as he gets hung.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm kind of a sadist when it comes to this stuff in some ways. It's the same reason I like the end of The Green Knight. I like these abrupt ends that send a message with the ending. It asks so many questions with the end of this. Just, it's so perfect. Number one, we've got, for those that don't know, like, well, the question is, what does the phrase mean? I knew what the phrase meant because I recognized it, but what does the phrase mean? What happens to Hadrian now? Because he clearly lived or comes back somehow. So how does that happen? What happens to the universe as a result of Hadrian's passing? Is there like a martyrdom fueled revolution because of Bessenderlin and his public execution? Does he come back right there? Does he come back? So all these questions that happen, and it's full circle with the series. We know that we knew at the start of the series that this happened, that he was executed, but to end it this way.
Well, we didn't know for sure because he was like, you were told that this happened.
Right. We knew,
but now we find out it did happen.
It does happen. It's thematic because it's the third time he's died. You know, the 3 days and the whole bit, you know? It's so...
Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth is a reference to the book of Job,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Genius.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Job is this, this book. It's a very suffering-oriented book in the Bible about a character who ostensibly is like a good person, and he goes through
one of the few,
and he goes through this horrible circumstance, and asks lots of questions of God about why. And the most famous response as God replies to Job is, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? There's this sort of idea that comes through of like, it's like, I promise you don't know the whole picture, basically. It's this sort of rally cry amidst suffering that there's something bigger going on that you don't know about. And when Hadrian discovers this is the thing that sort of gives him final solace to go and subject himself to this fate voluntarily. He's not dragged there kicking and screaming. He walks in there knowing this is going to happen. It's a beautiful end to this series. I'm so glad he decided to end it here. It just, if you had gone a couple more chapters and explained how he comes back or how he ends up on Colchis or something like that, this moment would be diminished. But ending the series here, it puts everything on this moment. I think it's perfect. It's exactly where I would have wanted it. And I never even occurred to me that it would end here. But as soon as things started playing out, I was like, I know what's going to happen, and I'm so glad. So it's the perfect thing. To me, it's like ending things right as the martyrdom happens. And I'm so curious, what happens? Do the Hadrianites march to the... I don't know what happens, and I'm so excited about it. It's really cool.
Better to leave people wanting more than to let them leave thinking, all right, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Right? Rocky mentions that, you mentioned he cut this part off. He's mentioned to us, the gala and in subsequent conversations, that he's not a writer by inspiration. He's a heavy outliner. He outlines every book. He outlined the entire series before writing it. So this was always the plan, that this event would happen. But one piece of inspiration that he had was the realization that anything after that in the outline didn't need to happen.
Yep.
And I think it was inspiration, right? Like, I agree wholeheartedly. Ending it any further would be less satisfying than this. I finished this book. I reread that page like 2 or 3 times. I closed it and I cried. And I haven't cried about a book and the significance of a book, at least in my life, and the meanings and the themes and all this different stuff, and this journey being over, right? Journey over destination is the entirety of the series. I have not cried at a book like that since I was a child. So it was special. The ending is special. It is perfect. It is satisfying. I do want to make a note that, like, I do think that there is some aspects of, I hope it's as satisfying for people with different worldviews.
Yeah.
I think the ending is perfect for those who have a theistic worldview.
Yeah,
right? I think it's a very, very good ending for people with a theistic worldview. I'm interested to hear people with, less certainty or sort of an anti-theistic worldview to see how they sort of picture it. But I think it's ending it any other way narratively would have been deeply unsatisfying. So I'm so glad he did it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting because Job, I come from a Christian background. What I found is that Job is really a litmus test in a lot of ways. A lot of religious folks that I know find Job deeply meaningful, and a lot of the folks that I know that are very strongly atheistic hate Job because there's a deep, almost disgust with the book, because it's like like the idea that this good person is put through torment for no reason. It's the response to this particular book and this ethic, I think, makes a big difference in terms of the way that it lands for people. So I'd be very curious to see if there's any criticism just because people are coming from different worldviews. It rings super true to me from my background, my beliefs. But it'll be interesting to see people that, like really aren't down with the Job thing and see what they think. But for me, it was perfect. I also think, I like that it asks another question. We're left with several questions at the end of this book. One is, what happens to Hadrian here? One is, we know that the empire ends somehow, but how does that happen? What does the Chantry do? And there's also this other big thing that I hadn't considered before the end of this conclusive thing is the sun being eaten is something that is described as something that was going to reverberate throughout the universe. As the light of that sun expands throughout the universe and is seen, it's going to become a beacon for watchers, other alien life. So at the end of this book in its totality, it's not just the end of this arc of the story. It may be the thing that calls the rest of the story to the universe. It's kind of brilliant because it may become the focal point for the next things that happen. So, I mean, it's a wonderful way to end not just Hadrian, but end this universe and maybe be the birth of a new one within it. What a wonderful conclusion. It's pretty unbelievable. It's such a perfect book. Couldn't disagree with anyone that doesn't find it extremely good. Even if someone's like, yeah, it's pretty good, but it's like, no. It's extremely good. It's
I can understand disagreeing with some of the philosophical elements, but from a narrative standpoint,
it's awesome.
I don't know how you could have ended it a better way.
Yeah, I agree.
So I disagree with anybody that thinks that there should have been a different narrative choice on where he ended.
Yep.
But leaves the door open for more stories to be told. I hope we don't get too much more of Hadrian, if I'm being honest. I think
whispers.
It's better for him to be
mythology.
Yeah, just like we talked about Karn at the beginning of our spoiler section. I hope we hear little rumblings of Hadrian in the future that points us back to it, but I don't want to see him on the screen very much anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think his story is perfect the way it is. And I'm excited to hear more about other people and other stories to be told in this universe for sure.
Yeah.
Not as long. Please, not as long. But
that's good.
I think we have talked about it plenty, and we have many, many, many more hours to talk about the series. But again, thank you for talking about it with me. It's safe to say, right? This is your favorite science fiction fantasy.
It's my favorite series that I've read for sure. Yeah. I have other interesting thoughts about some of the other series I finished, but this is it's just so consistent. It's so good. It's just quality throughout the entire thing. As of right now, it's my favorite series. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And it might be one of my favorite, if not my favorite book that I've ever read.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it plenty. I'm so excited to hear what people think about it and for more people to talk about it. And I'm excited to look through this new lens as we continue our journey. But that is us today. And although Hadrian will not continue, or not in the same way, we will, always forward.
And always down.
And we will talk to you folks next time.
See you folks.